Okay, Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee. We are back for ordinance number 24-0521. Ordinance of estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025. We're here tonight for Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD. Mayor Costello, councilman from the 11th District, chair of the committee. Far right, Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District member of the committee, Councilman John Bullock, 9th District, Councilman Isaac Gitzy Schleifer, 5th District member of the committee, Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District, Councilwoman Felicia Porter, 10th District. Far left, Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District member of the committee, Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District member of the committee, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District. We have representatives from the mayor's office and the council president's office, and Nia Garrett, staff to the committee, to my immediate right. First, before we begin, we were supposed to have Live Baltimore here at 6 p.m. I want to explain why they weren't here this evening. That was an error on my part. We originally were supposed to do the police department tonight, and DHCD was going to be whenever the police department was going to be. And there was a scheduling conflict, something that had been on the books for over a year that I was unaware of for the police commissioner. So I called Commissioner Kennedy to ask her if she would graciously switch her time slot, which she agreed to do. And I did not communicate that to Annie Milley at Live Baltimore, and thus why Live Baltimore was not here. So Live Baltimore was prepared for their hearing. So I do not want that to be a reflection on Ms. Milley or the staff at Live Baltimore or that organization. So that's on me. We will get to DHCD. Commissioner Kennedy, if you would please introduce first and last name of all of your senior team that is here to testify, just the folks in the council member seats, including position title, and then take it away with your presentation, please, and thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Costello and members of the council. Happy to be here this evening with you for our annual budget hearing. So with me this evening, we have Scott Davis, who is our Chief of Staff, Theo Ngongang, who is our Chief Operating Officer. Theo, you can raise your hand. We have Kimberly Rubens, our Chief of Policy and Research, Glenda Curtis, who is our Chief Equity Officer. We also have Felicia Knight Davis, who is our Chief of Human Resources. We also have our Deputy Commissioners, Deputy Commissioner Jason Hessler, Deputy Commissioner Eric Booker, Deputy Commissioner Nicole Hart, Deputy Commissioner Mary Correa, and Deputy Commissioner Kate Edwards are all with us. We also have with us, prepared to testify if needed, our Assistant Commissioners, Erica Yates, Lori Glass, Joe Kirshner, Tamara Woods, David Fielder, Nancy Goldring, Jeffrey Holland, and Tommy Williams. Also with us this evening is Jason Wright, our legislative liaison, who'll be able to take notes on anything that we need to provide to you, as well as Dr. Marvin Bly, who's our Chief Fiscal Officer. So with that, I wanted to just start out with, I know we have our slide presentation for you. Before I start clicking through the slides, I just wanted to acknowledge, why we're here tonight, which is the fun part, to do the annual talk about the budget, talk about our performance metrics, talk about what the vision is for the city and how we're reaching that and how we're trying to make Baltimore the best version of itself that it can be, and how we're here to collectively as a whole, between the council and the administration and the agency, tackle some really big problems that face our city and how we can do that together. The staff at DHCD and the agency as a whole, we recognize that we are not perfect. We recognize that both as an agency and as humans, we have flaws, but we are here willing to show up and willing to grow and willing to listen, engage, and willing to see how we can make improvements and how we can collectively work together to make those improvements as we look to have the largest impact that we possibly can on the residents, to create safe, thriving, neighborhoods, as well as safe and healthy individual places for our families to live. So with that, I'm going to kick us off by going through our slides. So overall, as you know, DHCD, like I just stated, we promote thriving neighborhoods through our community revitalization efforts. We have 5 operating divisions within the agency. So we have our permits and litigation, our homeownership and housing preservation, code enforcement, consolidated planning and development, all of which work to move forward all of our goals within the agency with the support of our supporting divisions, such as our chief of policy and our policy and research team, HR, fiscal, etc. So some of the big wins and goals that we have for fiscal year 25. So one of the biggest things that we have that has happened over the last year since we were here before you last spring-ish, it's still spring, is the work that was done in collaboration with the mayor's office and his partners with GBC and Build to work to create a capital plan to address vacant properties in the city of Baltimore and to drive that number down and to work on doing that in a holistic, comprehensive approach, achieving whole block outcomes and achieving better neighborhoods and areas. So that is a key component to what we're looking at for fiscal 25 in terms of implementing that work and continuing to implement that work, which we have been doing for a number of years now. We also want to ensure that we can continue to expand our resources for wealth building, as well as reducing, and preventing vacants as well, which is one of the components of where we are. So this the org chart in terms of how we're divided into services within the agency. The first service that I'll talk to is our 593 Community Support Project service. This service covers our Community Development Block Grant, as well as our Community Catalyst grant program as well. You will see if there's a question on here, we're talking about this, there was a change and a reduction in the % of activities carried out by subrecipients and city agencies that met contractual goals. Part of that reduction isn't necessarily that they didn't meet the goals, it's how we shifted on some of the reporting timelines, as well as how the contracts align with when reporting goals are in, as well as what is constituted by the timeline for CDBG. Our next service is 604, which is our before and after care service. This one works right now on one of our before and after care centers that we still have running. We've partnered with Rec and Parks on the other. This continues to be in our agency. This is one that for the future we have had conversations about within the administration and looking to align that and align this service with another agency. The administrative service of 737, that covers the top admin components of the agency, as well as where we are able to support a lot of the divisions with specific projects or agency-wide projects, as well as it has our HR, fiscal, policy research, communications, which when I was mentioning everybody before, also Tammy Hawley is here, our Chief of Strategic Communications as well. That is where this administrative component sits. One of the big changes that happened here is that we did move a couple of positions that moved over to BSIT out of this, and we also had some reallocation of funding that needed to move into other services to just kind of realign that component of the service. 738 is our weatherization services. This is one that last year for the fiscal year 23, the actual, you definitely will notice that we had a low on the actual number. There was a couple of different things that contributed to that, one of which we had issues with staff being able to pass the certification tests that are needed and required by the state in order to do this work. It's something that we're not the only jurisdiction that has had this issue, and it's something that we're working on trying to get and find staff members that can come in. We had one staff member that we hired, and we were doing training and trying to get them to be able to pass. I think we had them take the test 6 times, and they still weren't able to do that. We also had a director of weatherization services leave, and have been backfilling on that. So we are on target now. We've filled the director of weatherization position. We have staff members that have passed the test and are moving forward, and so we will continue to push that and to help clients receive weatherization services. We were able to still do out of weatherization services the no heat season, which we were still able to administer and be able to serve those clients throughout the year. 742 is our promote homeownership service. This covers not only the Office of Homeownership with our down payment and closing cost assistance, but this also has components of some of our other kind of lending pieces, specifically work that's done around lien releases, loan releases, documents, as well as work around our right to counsel and our eviction prevention work, kind of our legacy homeowner assistance as well when it comes to some of the tax sale prevention work, outreach around homeownership tax credit, the homeowner's tax credit, renter's tax credit, et cetera. Our 745 is our housing and code enforcement service. This position, this service, we do have, and I think this has come up in a couple of other hearings that we've had, so we know that, you know, we've talked about where we are currently with the number of staff and where we've been, which has been in the 44 range. And that has impacted the number of inspections that we've had, which is reflected in that reduction that you see for fiscal year 23. We've actually, as of this week, we've hired 6 additional inspectors with 4 additional inspectors starting in 2 weeks. So that will bring us up to that 54 number. And then we have an additional 7 positions that we're hiring for. So we will be actually hitting the mission, what Deputy Booker likes to call the kind of mission capable figure of 60 to 61 inspectors within several months. So like I said, we had 6 that started this past week. We have 4 that are starting in 2 weeks, and then we are actively recruiting for an additional 7 positions as well for that service. Registration and licensing. This covers our property registration, which is for any property that is a non-owner occupied property where you should be registering your property, as well as licensing your rentals. This is definitely one where we know that there's improvement. We know that there's improvement needed on enforcement and how to effectively find rentals that are illegally renting to occupants without the rental license. We have had coordination with the Sheriff's Office, which has been fantastic in terms of working with the Sheriff's Office on identifying properties. We've, you know, coordinated internally also with our code enforcement officers, community members, et cetera. This is one of the things too that sometimes it takes also finding and looking in places where you sometimes don't see advertisements for properties. Not every property is clearly advertised as a rental. So we also have our staff looking and searching on, you know, different, we've seen some staff members come across it on neighborhood listservs, et cetera, trying to figure out where we can help increase the number of licensed properties and registered properties. 748 is our affordable housing This promotes the creation of preservation through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and also works from our federal home loan program. We really look in this program and this service to leverage other dollars that we are contributing, to projects. Typically, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is either the first money in, which is going to help a project be able to succeed, and try to get that other money, or we're sometimes the last money in on a capital stack that sometimes can have 27 components to a capital stack to get an affordable housing project, 28 components to a capital stack to get that affordable housing project completed and built. 749 covers our property acquisition, our disposition, and asset management. We definitely have increased in terms of targets on this. Our fiscal year 23 actual was 697 in terms of active acquisitions that were assigned and moving through the pipeline, and have been working also in terms of the percent of disposition that has been completed within 120 days, working to strive to have that number be able to be met without sitting. And that was one of the things that we've been working on with new software components and working through, especially on the disposition side, not having dispositions languish for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. We've really been focused on trying to meet that 120-day mark. 750 is our housing rehabilitation services. This service is almost entirely funded through community development block grant funds. It covers the Office of Rehabilitation Services as well as our lead hazard reduction program, and really looks in terms of the number of rehab loans that we are able to exercise and close, and the number of lead. So we did have a reduction in some of the properties that were remediated for lead in 23. Part of that was due to some of the procurement issues with contractors, and we actually have had to run through that procurement a couple times to get enough contractors into the pipeline to be able to do the lead hazard reduction work. 751 is our building and zoning inspections and permit. For fiscal year 23, as we've brought up in other cases, we've issued over 40,000 permits in fiscal year 23. We know, and this is definitely one of those areas where we know that we have issues and have had issues with permits. And some of those issues are ones that are actively being addressed and worked on. We're actively working on the implementation of Acela, which is going to be the new software system that covers not just our permits, but also our code enforcement team and our inspections team, which will replace what we've commonly talked about before as CHIP. So we are on track for implementation of Acela by the end of December, January 1 of 2025. Acela will be implemented. We're actually meeting with all of the agencies. We meet almost daily to coordinate on the work around implementation of Acela and working through that. Also within the permits office, in order to do the work that we need to do on the software side, we did work on examining workflows and other components in terms of making sure that kind of from an operation standpoint, how that played out, and made some changes there that would also inform how we were building out the software and looking at that implementation. 752 is our community outreach and services. This really helps in some of our emergency situations, the number of families that we house during emergency services. So this follows when there's potentially a fire, when we have a really severe housing situation in terms of conditions and have had to immediately try to move or help to find temporary housing for a family, and also clients with sheltering during those periods of time as well. And then 754 is our summer food service program. This is one that is 100% grant funded. It runs through the state, Maryland State Department of Education. It's funded by USDA. And this is one where we still have not actually kind of gone back to some of the levels that we were pre-COVID. There's just been some changes in terms of the sites. So any nonprofit or for-profit, anybody can actually sign up. And now is the time. If anybody in any of your districts know of an entity that wants to sign up to be a summer food site, you have to go through training. You have to, know what days you're going to be open. We can serve breakfast and lunch. But the number of meals is really dependent upon the number of sites that we have across the city. All of our recreation sites, rec and parks, their sites, we partner with a number of our different partners to increase this. But we did see after the COVID-19 pandemic just a drop off in terms of the number of sites across the city that are available to serve meals. But we can serve if we have the site and they sign up. The other thing that gets people when they find out that they have to go through a training and do reporting daily, then unfortunately, even though this is really helping a population that needs to have significant help with feeding our youth across the city during the summer, sometimes they're like, nah, no, too much. So anything, we're willing and able to partner. If there's any ideas on additional sites, would love to talk with any of the council members to increase the number and the access in your districts as well as across the city. And that wraps up across all of our services, and happy to take any questions from the council.
Thank you. We've also been joined by Councilman C. Cohen, first district. So we're going to start with committee members. Middleton. And colleagues, I'm going to ask that we do one question apiece, one topic area. If you got a quick follow-up, like, can you explain to me how you came up with that number, or, why the letter A becomes before the letter B? Okay. That's fine. And I'm going to ask that we be efficient in asking our questions so that we can get through as many questions as possible. Council Vice President, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, that being said, I do have a request for the org chart, and then my question leads to the org chart.
Yep. So, Dexter, I believe we already have the org charts, right? Those should be uploaded to the SharePoint. Okay. We already have the org chart. Do you have a copy in front of you?
Yes. So usually on our org charts, we have the name of the person that's leading that organization with a phone number and email. And I think it's in dire need because this is a very large agency.
I think you sent it separately.
Yeah, so we had sent the org chart, and then there's a second document that has the names of all of those people with their contact information.
So we asked for cell phone for division chief and up. So yes. I think we have that.
Okay.
And what I'm going to ask for is someone from the president's office to get to get that emailed over to you, just so you don't have to deal with the SharePoint. But anyway. And that does not count as your question, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question, I guess my first one, and I want to thank your department and all of you, because your housing is really like a leader in just directing all of the other agencies. You start off a process with every, so you're very important agency to this city, and we thank you for that. So my question, looking at the org chart, the first thing I didn't see, which we continue to probably bring up all the time, and that's the equity officer, which I think you have one. And so my question is, is there staff with that officer? How are they helping with like internal studies of salaries and so on. What exactly is this officer doing, and what have they accomplished, or what kind of support do they need?
Excellent question. So Glenda Curtis, who is here, is our Chief Equity Officer. She does not have a staff person with her. She does have the support of the other kind of support staff. So if there's specific things, she's worked with, say, Chief Rubens on data and research components. I will ask if specifically she also works with all of the divisions and the operating divisions, has worked very closely also with Chief Operating Officer Nagongang and the deputies in terms of ensuring that there is coordination amongst the work that we're doing operationally from, which is the outward facing kind of operations around equity. I'll also have Glenda just say a couple brief words, but we are actually next week going to be doing something around the internal component that you mentioned.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, we just put together an internal equity survey, and the whole idea of the survey is to get the staff educated and just identify some of the barriers internally so that we can develop training to address those areas so that by the time we go into the community, we are shored up in our information to do the work within and then externally.
Are you including the other piece was the salary study of the whole agency, and because that's a part of equity?
Yes, that's included in the equity survey.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Alice. Thanks, everybody. I want to ask about right to counsel. What section is right to counsel covered under?
Right to counsel would fall under the homeownership and housing preservation side, and that would also fall in the service of 742, which is where we have our staff that work on that. We're actually supporting the Maryland Legal Services Corporation for right to counsel, and we're putting together right now budget for fiscal year 25. Currently, they're actually utilizing the ARPA funding that we've provided to them for right to counsel, and have been executing that, and then we'll be executing a new agreement for fiscal year 25.
So there's a state law and then the law. The state law requires full implementation by April 1st of 2025. The city law covers things that are a little bit more broad than the state law covers. And so to me, where all the funding sort of get and who's responsible to make sure that the state law is enacted by its deadline. And then if that money's covering that, like what we have to come up with locally to cover the portion that goes beyond what the state law requires. That's ours uniquely at the local level. Can you talk about that? And also just the city allocated like $1.5 million last year, I think, for this. And how much is being allocated for FY25?
Yeah, the goal for FY25 is 800,000, if not more. We're actually looking at how to also utilize community development block grant funding to help augment the funding for right to counsel for fiscal year 25. In response to the first part of your question, I would like to follow up with you on that to give you kind of a breakdown of the partnership with MLSC, how we worked out with all of the partners on right to counsel, kind of the responsibilities for marketing, access to council and where that falls. So if we can follow up with you on that to get you that information, we could do that in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, and so just so I'm clear, if we had like $1.5 million last year, and we right now only have 800,000 planned, we're going to be able to do less right to council work than we did, I mean, next year than we're doing right now.
Right now, potentially, yes. That doesn't mean that we are not trying to meet where we were at the level that we were last year. It's just working through the funding sources to get there. And also making sure the timeline of the use of the funds. Because at one point we did have an issue with the funds not being able to be used in certain timeframes by MLLC. So once I finalize that conversation, I can get back to you with exactly what that breakdown is.
Okay, Mr. Chair, as a final thing here, and if you, and rather than take time, because I know the chair wants to get through some folks here, do you have a way measuring like the success of like what we would consider full implementation of the state law and the city law? Do we have a mechanism or a means that we have and if you have it, and
we have specific metrics that we're following. I would say let's follow up afterwards to provide you with the members with the information on each for both the city and the state law.
Okay, is that something you can provide us all in writing? It's just like
and
then before the end of the budget hearings, like before we wrap all this up?
Yeah.
Can you get that by next Thursday, a week from today? Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Cohen. And then Ramos. I'm going to step out for 1 second. All right, before we do anything, Councilman Dorsey, please summarize your request in 1 sentence. Then Councilman Cohen, then Ramos.
To have a report on, or an explanation of what the metrics for success are on full implementation of the state and local right to counsel laws and where we stand in that. Do we get that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the entire DHCD team that's here. I want to thank you for working closely with my office on the Strengthening Renter Safety Act. Looking forward to passing that bill soon in partnership with the administration, and I just really appreciate your team's work on that and just recognizing the seriousness of the challenge that we have with some slum landlords in our city. However, I am concerned about the loss of 4 positions and 6 senior positions. This will be the second year where we see a cut in inspector positions. Now, I realize these are vacancies, but when I go into senior housing, when I go into some of our housing in this city is simply in deplorable condition, and it is clear that we do not have enough inspectors to do the work. I don't think we're paying folks enough compared to comparable jurisdictions. I don't think we're retaining folks. So can you justify the cut that is being made in this budget to additional housing inspector positions?
Yeah, so a portion of those positions there were 2 uses of the positions. One was actually to retain staff members within code enforcement. We used those positions, which the positions we used were historically positions that we were, that needed to be held open for vacancy, projected vacancy savings by the budget team and so forth. So the positions that we used were positions that were open for a number of years, which were in part of the breakdown that we have provided a while ago, actually, we had some work with your office on providing some of that background of where the positions were and what were considered to be vacancy hold positions. So a number of those positions were used to actually increase salaries within the code enforcement team so that we could retain key positions that have a significant amount of knowledge and wealth, and so that we could retain them, which is extremely important. So I do 100% justify that shift.
I
And
apologize.
so then, as Deputy Booker has stated, before, that mission capable is in that, 60 to 62 range. We have hired, actually this week, an additional 6 that started actually this week. So that brings us up. We have 4 more starting in 2 weeks. So we're up to 54. And then we have another 7 positions that are actively posted and hiring. So the goal is within the next, once we can hire those and get them in and get them started, that we will actually be back at mission capable, and we'll continue to increase the number from there as well.
I mean, and I appreciate that, and I do appreciate the increase of salary to try to retain those folks. I don't want us to be at mission capable when we know there are many slum landlords in our city that are, again, causing undue havoc. So does the cut for, we're further cutting more vacant positions. How are we going to attract more folks if year after year we are cutting positions from this critically important service?
So this service, actually, I see how these positions historically were never able to be filled. So they were there with an expectation that they would be held open. So I understand that it looks like a cut, but there actually has not been a cut previous to that in terms of that these positions were one that were part of vacancy savings. So I'd say it's a yes and to the question where, yes, it appears as though there was a cut, but previous to this year, those positions were actually not able to be filled at all. So we did work out with, the budget office and so forth to use some for the additional salaries, and then we're actually filling those additional positions. And on top of that, we have another 7 senior inspector positions that are on hold right now, where we're not actively recruiting. So we will get to mission capable within the next 3 months if everything moves forward. And then there's an additional 7 senior inspector positions that those senior inspector positions are used internally for promotional, and you have to be able to pass the test. So there actually is an increase in the number of positions that we're able to hire for and will have as we move people into those senior inspectors and then backfill the inspector positions that they left. So at the end of the day, once we get all of the 7 senior inspectors filled, we'll actually be hitting close to the 70 mark, which is actually above mission critical. Or mission capable.
I will yield after this, but I will just say that in a previous hearing, I believe Mr. Booker, Deputy Booker, told us that 86 was the number that we would hope to have. That would, I think it was the dream number, and then 74 was where we could make it work. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm pretty sure that was at the Strengthening Renter Safety Act. Those were the numbers that you had quoted. So 60 feels very low. Maybe we can do it with 60, but again, I worry about the health, safety, and wellness of our workforce, and that seems extremely tough.
And it's not 60 with the additional 7.
Understood.
It's actually closer to 70.
Yeah.
It's 70, hitting that 70 mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to start talking about the vacancy strategy. I saw in the book that you're planning on hiring 2 more people for acquisition disposition. Can you talk about what the current capacity is for acquisition disposition and what those 2 positions will be doing?
So the additional positions that we have, there are these 2 positions, additional ones. One second.
Specifically, the ones that I'm talking about are listed as helping with the IIA strategy and are associated with the $30 million in Project Core, which we actually don't know that we're getting, by the way. So, yeah, Project Core money, as I understand it, is administered by the state. The $30 million may not all come. It just depends on what proposal that you bring to the state that they will then decide whether that's what they're going to fund or not. So it kind of depends on. I guess I'm just trying to understand if, you know, the 2 positions are based on implementing that strategy relative to the $30 million, and the fact that we may not get it, how are they going to then be deployed? So
the highest positions that we have requested in terms of the additional positions, the first place we go is on the attorney side because of the need for acquisition for in-rem. We've actually restructured the division right now within the agency and have added even additional positions using some other salary savings and other components to support the division, the development division, and on the disposition side. We're reorganizing the division so that there's a planning component as well as the NDOs, the neighborhood development officers, to move those around. You know, the money from the state, I just want to say, I mean, we meet with the state weekly and biweekly, sometimes more, and it's fairly guaranteed. They have not indicated to us at the administration level or myself that that funding is not going to materialize. So
my understanding is that it's not coming here. If it does come, it would be MSA for stabilization, for demolition, and for the projects that Core generally funds.
No, that's not.
I just had a conversation with the state yesterday.
Then I will need to clarify that, because that's not the conversation that I've had today with his staff, and that has existed in all of our meetings with them. The Core money right now is slated to cover everything from acquisition and relocation to demolition, stabilization, infrastructure, which includes green space, vacant lots, and other components of the work. So we've gone through with them a budget that covers, actually, we covered with them a budget that's upwards of $67 million worth of work that could happen in next fiscal year. It is true that the stabilization, the demolition will go through MSA like we typically do and have that play out. We're in conversations about the stabilization dollars. We want MSA to do that. We're not 100% sure. It could come to us to flow through that. The acquisition and relocation funding would actually flow to us at the. So we can follow up and have another conversation, and I'd want to clarify that, but all of the conversations that I've had multiple times with Secretary Day and the staff, it's not just MSA, and it's not just flowing to us, and it's not just for stabilization and demolition.
Yeah, we definitely need to clarify that, because I had a conversation yesterday with somebody pretty high up in there as well, one of the senior staff, and so I want to make sure that we're all clear about what that looks like. And the $30 million is in the capital, it's in the book here, even though it may not necessarily be all of it here. So we just need to clarify that. And I'll just make a formal request to the committee to we'll follow up on where that 30 million is and what it's doing.
And the 30 million that is in the capital budget that was put in as appropriations, that's because it's the time when we had to put in and before the capital budget was going to be to the point of no return. We needed to put a placeholder in for the appropriations so that, and we knew that a portion of that was going to be potentially for MSA or a portion was going to be for another piece. So we are fully aware that there's part of that is not coming. While MSA might do the demolitions, our staff still has to do the notice, the service.
Of course, absolutely.
We still have to do notice and service on all the stabilizations, and we're doing all the acquisitions, relocations, infrastructure planning, and other components to that.
But my original question was about, well, I just want to make sure that we got the request taken care of, which is the 30
Why
million.
don't you summarize that in one sentence, please?
Sure. Just want to be super crystal clear about how the 30 million from the state Project Core money is going to be allocated.
You can leave out the crystal clear part, but
But my original question was about these 2 additional positions that are outlined in the book and what they'll be doing. And then my second...
no second.
I wasn't going to ask a question. I was going to ask a request.
What's the request?
Yep. Would be to get what the acquisition disposition capacity is now and what you're planning on, because you, Commissioner Art said that she was doing a lot of reorganizing, and so I wanted to get a sense of what that's going to look like after the reorganization, and then how we're taking this to scale, if we're going to really take it to scale, and I want to see those plans. I'm happy to summarize in an email, but that's what I'm doing.
Got it. Why don't we move to the next member, draft that up in like one sentence, and we'll get it to Marguerite, and then we'll read it once you get it over to her to make sure it's captured correctly. Does that work?
Yes.
Outstanding. Porter.
I had a quick question about, just following up from Councilman Cohen about inspectors. About the safety of inspectors, one of the things that we're working on, and we've seen in a few of the communities, is just lack of safety for inspectors as they go into some of these vacant housing. Can you speak to a strategy or even some sort of collaboration with BPD for the overall safety of inspectors?
Sure, I'm going to actually turn that over to Deputy Booker, but safety of all of our staff, including field staff across the board, is paramount to us, but I'll turn it over to Deputy Booker.
Councilwoman, could you repeat that, make sure I didn't miss anything?
Yes, sir. I asked about the safety of your inspectors as they're going out into the field. Oftentimes, particularly what we're seeing in my district is inspectors are going out. We have a criminal element that is within these vacant homes. Inspectors are going up. Even, just serving, just a inspection that may not go the right way for a business. Like, how are you all, or what is the strategy around safety regarding your inspectors?
Okay, thank you. Let me just start by telling you what the training is. We, a part of our training and a part of our ongoing dialogue as we have roll call is that safety's first. Anytime an inspector comes up on a situation that they don't feel comfortable with, i.e., your boys may be stashing in the alleys, you got to get down there to get a picture. We always say, live to fight another day. You'll be able to get that picture at another time. So we continue with the message, safety first. Keep your head on a swivel. If you feel uncomfortable, back off. It'll be there tomorrow. So that's what we do from a training standpoint. In the special ops space, when we are doing vacates, we have a good connection, good dialogue, a good relationship with BPD. Whoever their post officer is during those vacates, they are always notified that we're doing a vacate at a particular area and that we may need them. We don't call them if we don't need them, but if something is in fact occupied and it becomes hostile, we'll reach in and ask for the post officer to come. So we're being sensitive to our safety as well as to the bandwidth that the police have as well.
Definitely, and this is just a direct follow-up question. How many vacates have you done this year?
This year, we've done 74.
Out of how many?
Well, 74 is what we've done. So when I compare that to last year, we did 70 all year last year. We're just coming through May, and we've already done 74. So that demand has in fact increased, and you know, we continue to knock them down. You know, what's happening in that space is we have these repeat vacates because we can go and clear a property, secure it, but it's something about that property that makes a person come back. So we're in conversations with the Department of Public Works to see how we can better secure these properties, in addition to conversations with police to say, what is it about this property that keeps them coming back here? So we don't have the answer to that, but that is a part of how we analyze the environmental situation.
And I'll yield, just as a follow-up question, I'll yield my additional time to the next round for that line of questioning.
Thank you.
We've been joined by Councilman James Torrance, 7th District. I'm going to go out of order here and jump to Councilman Bullock, and then I'll come back to Conway and Torrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's a good time because it's a direct follow-up to both Councilmember Ramos and Councilmember Porter. The connection. I want to talk about the connection between the vacancy strategy and code enforcement. One of the things that it's appropriate that this is under equitable neighborhood development, and particularly as we look at West and Southwest Baltimore. I know there's some target blocks that we have had some conversations about. Can you talk about how those resources will be maximized, particularly in the areas that need them the most, but then also how code enforcement then leads to dealing with these vacancies, particularly as it relates to not only in rem foreclosure, but also disposing of these properties and the like, because we have properties, as you know, that have been vacant and blighted for quite some time, and they're both residential and they're both in residential areas and on commercial strips. So can you talk about that interplay, please?
Absolutely. So, as you know, we approach tackling the issue of vacant buildings in a holistic manner. So this isn't just about the development division, and just isn't about acquiring and disposing of properties. It actually involves every single division within the agency, and code enforcement plays a huge part in that. Code enforcement is the eyes on the ground that are out every day issuing new vacant building notices to start with. So that's one of the key components. They also are out issuing the failure to abate citations, which has greatly increased since we shifted. For years, it's well known that for years that wasn't a priority because we could be issuing and it didn't result in anything, and now we know that it will result in something by being able to utilize in REM and move that forward. The code enforcement team also engages in this work by helping us on the ground as work is happening on blocks and on those target blocks. So we have the impact investment areas, we have our other areas, geographic areas of focus. In the impact investment areas with the communities, we've created zones, such as zone 1s, 2s, 3s, all the way up to 5s, that have priority areas and priority areas around them, which build off of strength, which build off of, trying to make a targeted investment to see change happen and have that change grow from those target blocks. Code enforcement comes in also while the work is happening. So one of the components that we are working on is how, when we have our development partners that are doing work and actively doing work, oftentimes where we're funding to support getting their work, there's been questions about, issuing them a failure to abate while they've permits and while they're coordinating on doing work. Our code enforcement officer teams also try to catch and see when they see illegally occupied vacant properties, when they also do referrals directly to Deputy Hessler's team on potential dangerous vacant buildings that need, for emergency demolition. They also work as development is happening, because the more code enforcement, we help make sure that, overall that people are keeping their work site and not piling trash from developments in the back alleys or legally placing their debris from the renovation of the property. So the code enforcement team is working all the way from identifying the vacant building to then, even after a property sells, what they can do in the area around it to help with improper trash placement, all of the other components of code enforcement as well.
Thank you. And the only minor follow-up is just the time horizon. We know that there are buildings that have been vacant for quite some time. Do you envision, making things more rapid in terms of that movement? Because again, it's a challenge when things are vacant for so long.
No, it's a huge challenge with properties being vacant for so long. Today, we actually have dropped below 13,400. So we've actually dropped down and have continued to see a reduction in the number of vacant buildings. The plan that we've put out in terms of the capital strategy plan, as well as the operations planning, the organization, the implementation of software upgrades that we've made over the last several years, the upgrades to the permit system, all of it ties in to being able to actually get to these properties at scale and to see change that we've never seen before. If we were to keep working as we had worked prior to 2 fiscal years ago, or even a fiscal year ago, this issue probably would have taken us over 375 years if we kept going at the path and the pace that we were going. And everybody in this room can agree that we don't have 375 years to wait to do this. Our communities have waited too long and don't have time to wait anymore. So this is of the utmost importance and utmost urgency as we make the strategic decisions, operational decisions, capital decisions, working with all of our partners to see this happen at scale and to see it move quickly.
Agreed, and thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Conway. And Torrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate all the work your team does. I know we got a pretty big hole to dig ourselves out of. I want to follow up on the questions regarding vacants, and one of our often touted, especially by me, strategies for vacants has been NREM. I'm curious how many properties we've successfully gotten through the NREM process, and even more to that effect, thinking about our legal team, do we have enough lawyers on these issues in order to get these properties through NREM quickly? And how's that reflected in the budget?
Yeah, I got it. It's in here. I'm just finding all of my pages. So we actually have, in terms of, we filed over 234 cases since update, where we've actually requested, so one of the biggest bottlenecks that we have in order to file the case is the title work. That's the first thing that you have to do and start with. So it starts with the title abstract, it starts with the title examination and that work. And we have over 454 titles that have requested. We've received 433. We're actively working through those title examinations. We currently have open 290 in REM cases. We're finding out that right now the average days to judgment is around 164 in terms of the average day from when we filed to judgment. We have increased the number of attorneys in-house. One of the first things we did was to shift and actually hire an in-house title attorney, because title work was actually one of those bottlenecks that we realized before we even fully had worked out in REM with the court. We realized that title work was going to be one of the bottlenecks. So we now have 2 in-house title attorneys. We actually also have room for a temp title attorney. We're adding a paralegal to the title attorney work for in-rem. A lot of the work that has been done, especially in the last year, has been on the process, working with the court, working out exactly how they wanted to see the filings, making sure that we were good on service, which there were some questions about. There's certain components to the work that are time intensive, and we can talk a little bit more about that, but we're actively wrapping up. We actually have interviews.
Yeah, we have some interviews.
Oh,
sorry. So we're also, in addition to hiring additional attorneys, we're also hiring a managing attorney. So we have already done some interviews for that. We have additional interviews the week of June 10th. We have more interviews for actual in-rem attorneys that towards the end of June, around June 17th, I think. We've hired 2 attorneys since March, and we have another one in the works. We've hired 3 paralegals since March. And so we've been constantly interviewing and hiring, so it's kind of a regular process because, we only get so many at a time, but we're definitely moving forward on those interviews and the hiring process for all those positions. We have now a total of 32 positions under our legal section, which is about twice the size of what it was before. So we have grown a lot and put a lot of our resources towards this team. And so we're just getting hired up as quickly as possible.
So right now, they're still hiring for 9 additional attorneys between title and in-rem.
Really helpful to hear. One of the things I think would be really helpful for us in the budget going forward, knowing that this is going to be one of our major strategies for acquiring properties, is probably to put that in as a performance measure, something that we can very easily track year in, year out.
It's included in the performance measure under acquisitions.
Okay.
So it's with our acquisitions, condemnations, because condemnation is actually still a huge amount of the work that we need to do for acquisitions is condemnation cases. So the current metric does include all forms of acquisition, negotiated, condemnation, donation, and in-rem.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have a question real quick. I'll get to Torrance. When did Ms. Yates get promoted to assistant commissioner?
I want to say that's been at least 2 years now.
1 year?
1 year? It's only 1.
Before last budget? It happened after last budget hearing?
Right before.
Okay. I wanted to commend you. That was an outstanding decision that you and your administration made. That woman is a consummate public servant, is wildly competent and responsive, and we are very grateful in the 11th District for all the work that she has done. And I'm not going to break my own rules. That was my question. Torrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Commissioner and staff. The theme of tonight is going to be accountability and expansion of your services and innovation. As a person who represents West Baltimore, I'm uniquely frustrated with code enforcement in terms of after hours. I get often calls that someone is performing work after 4:30. Someone is illegally dumping on the weekend. So my question is, given the amount of ARPA dollars you have not spent yet, have we looked at innovatively working with CUB as well as MAPS to ensure that we have after-hour inspectors on the weekends and as nights?
We have not actively had that conversation with CUBS about that, but we can have a conversation in terms of what it would take to look at that. We have not yet.
Thank you. And for my first committee request, I would like a memo detailing what type of innovation you can do by August 1st. I'm just going to make it clear to the administration, I'm going to introduce legislation that will expand those hours in terms of those workers. I will no longer wait. This is second term. I will no longer wait for my people to deal with someone building a basement door on a weekend and no one respond. I will no longer hear someone removing lead pipes and no one respond at night. So I'm just making it clear to the administration, if you don't move, we will move.
Thank you for that. And can I have a clarity on your request?
The request is, I want to have a detailed plan before I submit my legislation, changing your operations on how we could accommodate your actual operations for weekend and evenings for your inspectors, whether it be part-time or full-time. It has to change.
And is that, you said by August 1st?
By August 1st. And to staff smiling, this is me being very clear. You have an expectation to be public servants and professionals. With my next question, Commissioner.
Well, that's.
Oh, sorry.
That's your, yep, we're only doing one. So I want to just take a moment to take the temperature down here, because everyone in this room is a hardworking public servant, and I understand the frustration with progress, right? That's understandable. We all experience that. So so Councilman, what I'm going to ask, if it's all right, is for you to get us by, say, tonight or tomorrow morning, an email clarifying not the justification, because I think we all understand the justification, but just some clarity on the specific artifact that you would like transmitted via writing by August 1st. So if you could get that to me and Dexter and Marguerite, that'd be perfect, and then get it over to the administration, and then DHCD can start to work on preparing something in writing. Does that work? Thank you. Excellent. Okay, we've cycled through everyone. Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And on that note, let's talk about, my question, I guess, is about the agency's role in licensing of transitional and group homes, which I'm sure all of our districts deal with on a consistent basis, whether it's a group home for drug treatment, all the different reasons. I have really gotten frustrated because, and I can kind of relate to my district specific, with the large homes like from Ashburton, Windsor Hills, Forest Park, Callaway Garrison, big, huge homes that people are, rebuilding, sliding in people from all different walks of life, just literally destroying the make of the community. I think the frustration lies on the follow-up. When these places are built, we get the complaints of, we know that we can't really do anything when it's 4 to 6 people and all those rules that have come into place, but we end up doing the follow-up work when they are not compliant of when the applicant is not compliant, and it's really getting worse. It has gotten worse after COVID because I guess people were able to sneak and do things, and I feel like when the incident happens and I share it with your office, they respond right away the first time, the first conversation, but then it's like pulling teeth, like the person I'm talking to has to take time to find out what to do. Are people trained to take care of this specific duty? We have gone through, a lot of people with institutional knowledge have left. And there's a lot of new people doing things, and it's just so confusing. Constituents are getting very upset about it. We need to have some kind of plan about these transitional housing and group homes because they are destroying communities. We have the community presidents that, They're now trying to maybe have a couple people just watch in their neighborhoods, and then they're constantly picking at and communicating. So there's no clear plan on really how to deal with this, and something has to give. Please comment.
There's a couple. One is that transitional and group homes are not under a special license, and they are protected under the American Disabilities Act and as a special consideration. So that's one of the first components to this, is that there are legalities involved in us not being able to, just shut them down legally and so forth. We have been working with the law department on potential ways to address it. We have made some changes that we could in terms of enforcement of building code items and health and safety items within the homes. I'm going to ask Deputy Hessler to make any additional comments on that.
The Commissioner covered actually most of my comments, but it is that each one is a case-by-case basis, and I understand your frustration. I hear from the community as well. And I think that when you're reaching back out and your frustration with the response or the feeling that it's kind of new, or do they know what they're doing, I think a lot of that is because they're reaching to try and solve the problems that are arising while staying within the law. And not overstepping and violating anyone's civil rights or being inequitable, but still trying to resolve those complaints that they're getting from the community of noise or trash or cars being parked or drugs being used or too many people hanging out. And so it's really trying to get creative, in a sense, within the limits of the law as to how to bring that property into compliance with the code. The changes that the Commissioner mentioned, those are on the front end, and those are really just to make sure that the properties are up to code and safe for the way they're being used, so that should there be an emergency situation, a fire or something of that nature, that the occupants can safely get out of the property, that the first responders are safe in responding and dealing with it. But it does, in many cases, at a cost to operating a facility like that or getting one started up, and some time and energy. So we don't intend for it to be a barrier. We just want to make sure that the property is safe.
What about the people that don't have the permits, that are illegal doing these things? They're not being shut down right away. It seems to be weeks or months that these places continue to operate. And some of them are in areas where there's already, drug rehab group homes, and then another kind will come up on that same block. Yep. It's like they're destroying the make of the community, and a lot of them are illegally operating. Is there a plan where the police can come in and shut it down? Why are they allowed to continue to do this illegally?
Yep. So when we uncover an illegal operation, we issue the violation notice, and then we would take court action. It's not something that the police could come in and shut down or make everybody leave. Now, if the property was so dangerous that it was putting those people's lives at risk, that's a different story. But generally, that's not the case. It's just that they're not maintaining the property, they're not taking the trash out, they're being too loud. And those are not things where we would be able to clear the property out or arrest people or take any kind of police action of that nature. The majority of the places that we come across, they have the proper permits for the work that was done in the property to be able to use it in that fashion, and they've got the proper use permits to do it. And you raised the question about the location of them, and that's not something we take into consideration because we're not allowed to take that into consideration. We understand that that's a complaint. We understand that impacts communities and neighborhoods. However, our hands are tied in what is constitutionally allowed. And, you know, that's, yeah.
So this conversation feels eerily similar to conversations we had in 2018, 2019 with medical marijuana facilities coming to the city and folks not wanting those in their communities. I think that one of the things that might be helpful here is for is Faith still here? I think she might have stepped out. BBMR? Who from the administration is here? Anyone? Who? Nina. Excellent. Oh, no, you don't have to answer. I just wanted you to hear it. I think it would be really helpful if there was a memo with the law department taking the lead in consultation with zoning and Mr. Veal and DHCD and any other appropriate agencies, clarifying once and for all the specific legal constraints around the city attempting to regulate location related to group homes, transitional homes, drug treatment facilities. And the reason I bring this up, and I'm blanking on I'm just going to start over because Faith's here now. No. I just want you to hear this. But Council Vice President Middleton had a question about group homes and other related transitional housing. And I think it would be helpful if we had once and for all a memo with the law department taking the lead, explain and in coordination with DHCD, specifically zoning and any other relevant city agencies, explaining the specifics behind why the city cannot regulate the location, and like specific references to federal law and or any applicable state law. All I know is that we can't do that, but I can't point to the specific citation in federal code or state code. And the reason I thought of this, I remember now. We had an issue with a school in the 11th district in the last week. And there was some issues in communications between Baltimore City Public Schools and the community. And schools said, well, we can't share this information with you because it's personnel related and we're prohibited from sharing it. And that was it. And all that does is, and this isn't directed at DHCD, all that does is agitate people because it just tells you can't have the thing that you want. But if you all being the administration, like the mayor's administration, explain details step by step why we can't do that. Because what's interesting is it's not just members of the council, we have members of the General Assembly who raise this same issue, despite the fact that they know the answer to the question. So it'd be very helpful if we had a written artifact, a memo signed by the city solicitor. Faith, is that possible? We get Ebony's signature on this one. So I just want a memo explaining all the rules of the ball game so that people understand, so that when Council Vice President gets a question from one of our community associations, she's not on the hook, and she's also not giving kind of a half-hearted answer to it. She's saying there's legitimate legal reasons why we can't do this thing, and I want you to have this 18-page memo written by a bunch of lawyers that explains it. Does it make sense?
It does make sense. I'm actually looking because I actually believe that former Solicitor Shea wrote an opinion on this. So Nina and I are both looking now, but if we do not have that opinion, then we will ask the solicitor to draft that opinion.
And even if we do, if we get it,
okay.
Even if we get it updated on letterhead with a new date of this month, and also make sure we're including the scope of this, group homes, transitional, all of the things that, generally speaking, trying to figure out how to word this, that one could reasonably assume that community members may find to be undesirable within their community because of perception and because stigmas associated with that type of thing or facility. So medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, all those things, if that makes sense. Is that?
You summed it up perfectly, because at the end of the day, the problem comes to us. And then we have to we farm it off onto housing. So this would be a way to just settle the score, you know, with all the different layers.
And then that absolves you guys. So you guys are out of it, and then, no, well, but then we can just blame it on the law department.
Mr. Chair, could we add to that memo the things that have been done to try to address this issue? We just passed a bill that updates.
If you want to make that as a separate request, you are welcome to do that. For this memo, for my request, I would just like this memo to address the legal framework and why we can't. But you, as a member, please make that request. I would just ask that it's kept separate from this memo. Yeah. I don't want to get into, like, you know, what the legislature has tried to do, or some of which may have been successful, some of which may have not been.
Yep. So we do have a draft of the memo. We will share that draft with you as soon as I'm able to pull it. You can review that draft and then add, then follow up with me about what you want added to it. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
And this memo will help educate our constituency, and also will just help us to explain what we.
Well, I think it'll help educate us.
All of us. True.
All of
true.
us.
We get calls every week. It's always one somewhere, you know, that has a problem.
Torrance, you have a quick add-on to this comment?
Yeah, I remember this memo. I actually have it in my inbox. It's the vice of counsel, so we will have to waive counsel or have a public-facing one. That was advice given to us.
Yeah, well, that's
anything,
anything from the law department.
Okay.
Yeah, yep.
Mr. Chair, point of clarification on that. At one point in you were talking about group homes, convalescent homes, those things, but then you added medical marijuana dispensaries. Just wanted to make sure, because from a legal viewpoint, I think those are two different memos.
Sure. Well, I would ask that it's included in one. The reason, okay. But when we talked about medical marijuana, the decision that the administration at the time made was that a dispensary was going to be permitted wherever a pharmacy was permitted by zoning, and that a growery or what's the thing in the middle, processor or refinery, whatever, was going to be treated as industrial. So, for example, if a property was zoned to have a CVS or a Walgreens, it could have a dispensary. If a property was zoned to have a warehouse or a scrapyard, it could have a growery. So I want to, God bless you, I want to include in there the scope of all the things that you could imagine one of your loved ones or one of your neighbors not wanting in their neighborhood because of the perception or the stigma associated with that type of facility. We don't need to go so far as like a bar, right? But like, this is all kind of, you know, the marijuana space is kind of new legally. And then, you know, this group home, transitional housing, drug treatment facilities, methadone clinics, all that. I think we're all on the same page as to like what's in the scope.
And I could see also adding liquor stores, vape shops, you know, because even though zone, like the vape shop is one that we've gotten questions on too, because.
So to summarize, I would like I would like one comprehensive memo that explains the legal framework around what the city can and can't do, specific citations to any federal or state law, or any judicial precedent which prohibits or permits the city to do things related to these things that are perceived as undesirable within a community. Thank you. All right. Good. Outstanding. Okay. Dorsey.
I have to say, you're an impressive chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate your work. My staff deals with light applications a lot more than I do, so I'm a little bit out of the day-to-day of light applications, but we do get a lot of requests for this kind of assistance. But my understanding is that whoever has been in directorship and handling of light applications is no longer with the department. Has some change in personnel occurred? No.
No.
Has something happened with the processing of light applications?
I think that the biggest thing that has happened with the processing of light applications is the demand for services. So right now, we have, over 3,900, and we have, Deputy Commissioner Hart, is it 4 social service coordinators right now? You can.
Yeah, we have 4 social service coordinators that actually work on the document collection piece. So just to speak to what the commissioner was saying, my notes, I can tell you exactly how many we have. So we have 3,900 people on the wait list as of 5/23. We have 654 active cases. So of those 4 coordinators, we have 654 cases that they are working through the document collection phase. That's the longest phase because it depends on the homeowner based upon getting all of the documents for compliance to be able to consider it a certified application to move it to the scope phase. And I will say as of 5/23, the light department processed a total of 345 cases year to date that were submitted for rehab services, and they processed 270 that were submitted and certified for weatherization cases. And so we did not have a change in the director from fiscal year. I was the prior manager, and then I have been deputy commissioner since 2020. We did have some changes with managers within the division, but they did not affect the light department.
I'm sorry. My staff is watching the hearing, and they're asking me to pull a direct quote from an email that I'm assuming if I open this up is going to be to the contrary of what I've just heard here. Bear with me for 1 second here. I'm sorry, I can't pull this up quickly enough, I don't think.
We'll come back to you.
If we could, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Remain deeply concerned about the proliferation of illegal dumping across the city. How many special investigation unit folks do we have specifically around illegal dumping, and what's the target over there?
Deputy Hasler.
So we have 14 positions within Special Investigations Unit. 13 of those are for investigators and then 1 office support person. We currently have 8 active investigators that are in the field. 1 that's on extended leave that we hope will be back in a month. And then we have 4 open positions, all of which we've completed interviews. We have hiring request out. So we had 7 candidates that were acceptable. So we're hoping out of those 7 that 4 accept. But we've been trying to hire additional investigators over the last year. And we seem to hire 2, and then 1 doesn't take the job, 1 stays on, and then we had another opening, so then we try to hire 2 more, and kind of the same thing. So it's been a tough job in hiring, but we do have, hopefully in the next month, be fully staffed. We do have 1 retirement coming up. Oh, that's where the numbers are off. Yeah, so we have 1 retirement, but we did interviews for that retirement position because she just retired. So we'll be fully staffed in a month.
And so for all those field positions, they're just doing illegal dumping, or?
No. The special investigations units, we have investigator 1s and 2s. They're all cross-trained in all the tasks that we do within that unit. So we do skip trace investigations, trying to locate individuals to assist the housing inspectors and the attorneys. We do process service on all of the litigation cases within the code enforcement division, so receiverships and the other housing violation notice cases and dumping cases. And then the monitoring of the cameras, answering the service requests, and enforcement around licensing, registration, false alarms. Yeah, that's the main tasks.
So again, given that there is pretty clearly a lag between when folks are doing 311s and in some cases when inspectors are getting out there and issuing the citations and then clearing it so that DPW can come and pick up the dumping or the trash, what would be full strength? Like what would it look like to be fully staffed up in that position?
Well, so from the illegal dumping standpoint, on average, we get about 30 SRs a day. So we have 2 investigators that go out every day to do SRs, and it's 30 to 50. On a Monday, it'll usually be a little bit heavier than a Thursday or a Friday. So we have 30 to 50 a day. We have 2 investigators that go out every day. So our average on that with the illegal dumping SRs is with closing them 2 to 3 days. And some of that is that we've been out there, investigated it, created the work order, but then the staff person in the office is a little bit delayed by another day in closing it out. Then we have 2 other investigators that go out every day proactively, really checking our cameras that we have throughout the city, looking for any dumping that may have occurred on those cameras, collecting that evidence and following up on it. So for what we're doing, we are staffed, and getting these 4 people will help us to be able to do more on the registration and licensing and more on the skip trace. But for the illegal dumping investigations, we're covering everything that's coming in and the cameras. Now, we've just ordered 45 additional cameras that are coming in. We've been recently deploying those cameras instead of it being 45 additional locations. We've been covering locations where we think that we're missing dumping with just using 1 camera or 2 cameras, because we've kind of expanded what is a good site where we could use cameras by using multiple cameras to cover multiple entry points, and catch people that way. So, 35 to 40 cameras is really what a person can do in a week, and follow up on their investigations. So as we increase cameras, then we'd have to shift staffing for more cameras.
Jason, is it realistic for 2 folks to cover 30 to 50 SRs per day?
Yes. Yeah, we're able to get all those done in a day and close them out.
That seems like a lot. And again, what I think my colleagues hear from constituents is that it's taking multiple days to get the SRs cleared, that they're not seeing the response time as being effective and quick. Sometimes the transfer from housing to DPW gets messy and trash doesn't get picked up. It just feels like 60 requests, 30 requests a day is a lot for 2 people to go out and handle all day long.
Yeah, I mean, broken up, it's, with the average being around 30, they're each doing 15 a day. So that's generally reasonable. And sometimes you'll get into situations where it's a lot larger or more in depth, and so then, things may slip. But for the most part with the SRs, they're able to handle it. And when we do need to, we can pull people that are doing other tasks, because everybody's cross-trained. So it's not a specific person that has to go out on SRs. Any one of those investigators can go out and do them. So if more come in, we pull someone away from doing investigations to go out and do SRs. So we're flexible in that matter. But it is, you're right in the sense that there's a ton of work across the board for all those things. So if you're focusing on one thing, you do allow something else to get stretched out. And then you have to compensate, later when, it's a rainy week and there's not a lot of SRs because people aren't seeing the stuff or going outside, then you can catch up on your investigations, your skip traces, or those types of things. So we adjust.
Thank you, Mr. Hessler.
And I would just add that I think we actually in the last year have had some successes around illegal dumping with the deployment of the initial purchase of additional cameras. It was within a short couple, was it a week?
Yeah, it was
about a week.
Within 2 weeks, I think we had 10 cases, I think it was, that the new cameras picked up. So it was just being able to cover the road coming in, the road coming out, and the alley entrance, because one camera alone wouldn't pick up the license plate if the person pulled in and backed out and they didn't have a front tag on or it was covered up. But by putting cameras on both ends, you would catch both the image of the person, the image of the stuff, and the plate, and be able to tie it all together. And so that made a big difference on places where we weren't getting catching anyone, though we knew dumping was occurring. So additional cameras do help. And the technology is getting better too,
Yeah.
so.
And I would also add that we worked at the state level in the General Assembly to get past the ability to be able to publish photographic evidence and faces of potential illegal dumpers to help us catch those perpetrators as we would with, police department, et cetera. So we worked to get that passed and signed. And even more recently, as last week, I approved additional cameras for replacement of some of our older technology cameras, to also add additional license plate reader cameras and higher quality technology that we're going to test as well to help. So in addition to the 45, we're actually bringing on even an additional 35 to help with some of the higher quality technology that will aid in this.
Can I just clarify one thing the commissioner said? Because people hear this and then don't actually understand it. When the term license reader cameras, they don't actually link up to the internet and run the license plate or anything of that nature. It's just that the camera and the flash combination illuminates the license plate so that it gets picked up on the photograph. And then staff acquire those images from the camera and are able to run it through the database to see. So it's not the same as, I think the police department has cars that read license plates and then pop up and alert them that it's not registered or it's got parking tickets or something like that.
Noted. Again, appreciate the technology advancement, appreciate there was a pilot that you all were doing in my district in Greektown with DPW to kind of target a hotspot. just remain deeply concerned that there is a woman in manpower shortage, both in special investigations and in the housing inspectors. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Commissioner and Deputy Hessler, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you want me to articulate my last request real quick?
Start off with that. That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. I did send it on email, but just wanted to clarify with everyone. My second request from the last time was, what's the current capacity for acquisition disposition? What is the reorganization of this look like? Because the commissioner talked about that. And then what is the plan to scale up to really address the vacancy crisis at scale? So you'd separate this into in-rem, lawyers and staff, which we did get some numbers for, so thank you very much. Other acquisition methods, disposition staff, and planning and outreach. And that's all in my email. So my question is still on Service 749, acquisition disposition. Oh, that's right, good point. Is it possible to get all that in a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Under the outcomes here, average number of days to complete the in-rem acquisitions, I think you said it was 169, and in the outcomes here, it's 270. So I'd love to see the 169 number, because that's what we were hoping for, is that the in-rem process would be a lot quicker. And then related to that is the number of properties sold within the last 12 months that are under permit. Can we have what that actual number is? Like, of the properties that you're saying that there's a percentage of, what is the actual number?
We can get both of those numbers. So the 64 average days is based off of our most recent data analysis that we've done in the last 2 weeks or so. So we can get you that updated information that would show that.
And Councilwoman, the performance metric in the outcome, the average number of days to complete in-rem acquisitions, that is a brand new performance measure. And so the number that you see in the book, that 270, is the target for FY2025.
Right. Well, when we worked all together to develop in-rem, the work was about trying to get this done quicker.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we want to set expectations, we want to exceed the expectations, but we also don't want to just put a number there because we're putting a number there.
Well, also, I'd like to we had to complete the targets last fall. So at that point, we had no, we were thinking that the average
last
was
year
like
was
11, it was potentially going to be 11 months as actually like higher. So the target, for fiscal year, the actual for fiscal year 25 will be much different than what the target is. And then the target for fiscal year 26 will be based off of a full year of historic data. So this was done just based off of knowing that when we were filling this out back in August and September.
Right, yeah, no, at that time, it was not even a year that we were implementing. So I get that, and why the NA is there, I totally get it. We just, and there's lots of reasons why it's not some cases take a little longer, I get that. But we've done it for a year, we kind of know what we're doing. Once we have more capacity, we'll be able to do this quicker. I just want to set a good goal for us so that we can move that forward. So I would change that. And then just get me and I'll send this to you. Also, with this outcome, it's the number of properties sold within the last 12 months that are under permit. I want to know, the percentage of properties. I want to know what the number of properties we're talking about, and then what makes up the percentage. So I'd be interested to understand, particularly around the questioning I'll have the next round, relative to the fixed price as well as whole block. When we're talking about properties that we're selling, that the city is selling, I'd like to know that number. So I'll put that in our request. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner, I had a quick question about code enforcement for commercial spaces or just commercial corridors. Is there a current evaluation or even just a process for inspections of commercial corridors, like permits, things of that nature?
Yes, I mean, it would fall into the work that happens on a daily basis. If there is, on the permit side, if there's work without permits or something along those lines, that would fall under Deputy Hessler and the buildings inspections team. And then in our commercial corridors, as it relates to improper trash and others, it would relate on the code enforcement side. I don't know, Deputy Booker, if you want to fill in.
No, just with respect to commercial corridors and residential, property maintenance is property maintenance. So whatever inspector has that territory, they're responsible for residential as well as commercial property maintenance, which includes the exterior sanitary conditions.
Would it be possible to get, just in the last 30 days, how many inspections you've done in commercial corridors? One of the issues that we're seeing in not only just South Baltimore, but I noticed like on Greenmount, I noticed in James's district, like there are, illegal trash that's being put out at, before the 6 o'clock mark. There are recycling that's just like spewing in the street. So it's just like, I know that it's, I believe you when you say it's happening. I just don't see it. And I want it, I want it more quantified.
Yeah, so something like that, I would run through the special operations team as opposed to putting it on the inspector that has that footprint, because that's a lot of burden on them. So when we talk about trash being put out illegally, to recycle, I've seen this very thing that you're talking about. The way that I like to approach that is have those targeted areas and run that through the special operations team, so that it doesn't impact what the everyday inspector is doing, chasing SRs and stuff. So if you have some specific areas, then I can definitely put that in the special ops team's work, and they will stay on it until, that baby is born, if you will. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to circle back to a policy that this council passed, I don't know, like a year or two ago, the Cool Roofs Ordinance. I haven't noticed any educational efforts or anything like that, or enforcement efforts that I'm aware of. I'm curious, has there been any effort there? How are we making sure that residents know about the ordinance and are implementing the Cool Roofs Ordinance appropriately?
That's a good question. I can say that I don't think we have, and we haven't, I know that we haven't done a proactive education campaign on cool roofs in a number of years. One of the last campaigns around, as a city as a whole, around cool roofs was probably actually when I was in the sustainability, going back to when I was in the sustainability office. Internal to DHCD, we have our own internal policies that we've implemented for a number of years, actually going back at this point, probably 6 to 7 years. The first line for all of our rehabilitation programs and so forth is a cool roof installation for residential properties. That's the first go-to in terms of a scope. We can't spend a homeowner's money either, so there have been situations where there was a slight price difference, and even though it's covered under either a 0% deferred loan or something, they didn't want to go that route. We also do cool roof installations associated with the low-income solar work that we've done with Baltimore Shines. It's also a spec in the stabilization specs that we're working on revamping and re-putting out for stabilization work on vacant properties. It is the standard spec for a new roof on a vacant property as well as part of stabilization work. So, internally we've been making those strides and pushing that forward. I think it would be appropriate actually to work with the Office of Sustainability on the broader campaign in terms of, increasing cool roof technology, the cool roof systems.
Yeah.
And we've also actually had some of our local job training had fallen off, so Civic Works had stopped doing cool roof installations for a while. They're picking that back up with some of the other job training opportunities. I will say, spending as much time as I do and the team does in code map every day and in our aerial system that is linked for us, where we look at aerial images of the city, of all the roofs. There is a significant number of cool roofs that are out across the city, and it's more common, either cool roof or even kind of the older fashioned silver coat, which is still considered a lighter coat. So we can definitely improve, and I'll make that commitment to partner with the Office of Sustainability on a broader education campaign.
Yeah, I appreciate that commitment, and I think there are probably opportunities through any data that we may have through building permits and folks that are getting construction permits on homes that may often do roofs, to notify those folks by whatever channels we may have. And during that construction permit process, I understand there is no permit to build a roof, but if you are doing a massive rebuild of a home or renovation of a home, roof is going to be at the top of that list. I didn't even do that on purpose. You guys are sleeping. Stop it. You just got it. Yeah. So we know roofs are going to come in at certain opportunities, and it sort of begs the question, even if it's just a handout when we offer those permits, letting them know, hey, there's this new ordinance. When you're choosing materials, think about these considerations. But I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll make this an official request. If you can provide an update of how we plan to educate folks on the policy in partnership with sustainability, and then also how we can look at our internal operations and implement tweaks and changes to notify folks in their building process, whether it be through permits or any other potential gateways where they interact with the city that might help us let people know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to code enforcement, explicitly SEI, the Special Investigations Unit. What I'm finding in a number of hotspots, and I'm just being very specific, Lincoln Park, Wahhaton, and Towanda, as well as the 27 and 2800 blocks of North Avenue, repeated illegal dumping. What I want to know is, one, what is the schedule of actually the drives of that unit? Actually, this is a committee request. I want to know how many times they visited those 3 locations. The reason why is because it's repeated. There is no camera in those locations. And when my office asked for where the cameras were, we were told we were not allowed to have it, the information. In addition to that, I'm adding on to the committee request. I want to know where we status. At one time, we were looking at a drone program as well. So I don't know where we are with that. I say this because you have limited resources, limited people. And this goes back to that question I said, the theme of the night is about innovation. I want to know how we can innovatively address this, because for the residents in those areas, we're repeatedly seeing car parts and cars, trash, as well as renovation materials, as well as many other things continually dumped on a regular, to the point that I have staff drive weekly, and I can list every 311 we've made. We've had staff go out, it's gone to that day, they come back that night, they dump an entire again, right? It is a repeated thing. I want to change culture, but in the end of it, DPW has been immaculate in coming, even if I tell them not to ignore that they don't need you, to just clean it up, because it happens so often. So what I want to know is, how are we going to work with you guys to look at those 3 locations? So, and staff is listening, so they're going to email another request to the chair as well as staff. And again, it is the 28 and 2700 blocks of North Avenue in the rear. In addition to that, Wahhaton and Towanda Avenue, where we have a suspected chop shop as well. And I'm just going to say that publicly. whether the person is listening or not, because we've had to repeatedly work with DOT, who cannot move to actually remove the vehicles unless your unit actually writes the ticket for it. And then DPW cannot clean the trash unless your unit actually investigates it. So again, this is repeatedly happening daily, weekly. In addition to that, the rear Lincoln Park. I say that because, and I mean this for your equity coordinator, I was told last year by agency staff that we should close off an entrance to a historically black neighborhood to prevent them from dumping tires in the rear of their houses, right? And to me, to disenfranchise tax-paying people, and I'm gonna be frank, the average tax bill in that neighborhood is around $6,000 a year. To tell me I can't drive out the back of my house because someone repeatedly dumps and you want to cut off that access is unacceptable. So I wanna know, what are we gonna do about it? Because DPW is handling it. It's just that the investigations has not happened. Ms. Yates has been a gem with getting staff out there when we needed them to right away. But with the Special Investigations Unit, I want to know, where are they at? What are they doing? And that is the end of it. But my staff will be emailing it as well.
Councilman, can you confirm for me, it was Tawanda and?
Wahatan. Okay. Tawanda and Wahatan, the 27 through 2800 block of West North Avenue. And then Lincoln Park, and around the community of Fairmount Park. Near, and to be explicit, not 200 yards from the DPW water station, to be fact. The reason why I bring that up is because we requested a camera because there's actually a power source and internet access for a digital camera there.
Councilman Torrance. Councilman Torrance, 1 sentence time for Marguerite. You're going to email it. Outstanding. All right. We're going to email it. Okay.
Here.
Middleton. Yep.
Thank you. So
you were on my mind. You're next.
So we all hear the term generational wealth. A lot of advocacy groups say it in their speeches as they want to try to move Baltimore forward. My question is, do you have a demolition plan in place to create home ownership and generational wealth? I'll give you a corner. Garrison Boulevard and West Cold Spring Lane, that corner, there were 2 or 3 houses on that corner. Took many years to finally get those houses demolished, and now, going on 5, 6 years, the space is just sitting there, grass growing, a problem. Is there a plan that can, I'm calling a demolition, do you have a succession plan to put houses to home ownership to help with generational wealth?
We do, and I will have the team look exactly at those lots. They're not ones that are immediately on my radar. The key piece to that is I'd also have to double check to see if when we did that demolition, if it was done through due process, which would mean that there still are private owners of those lots. The plan that we've put together with Mayor Scott and the partners also does address vacant lots and putting the vacant lots back into productive use to create housing opportunities or green space or however what the community is looking at. So we do have planning, and that planning is done in partnership with our communities. So it's one of the things in your district that we talk about with Yolanda and the PHR team in terms of where the opportunities are for new construction and infill new construction to support home ownership outcomes, to have, and create that generational wealth. Specific to those properties, I can't speak directly right now, but we will investigate those, and I'll see what can be done in terms of acquisition, and then we can, work, with a developer or a team that's interested in building new construction home ownership there. But that is a key component to the strategy around reducing vacant properties. Isn't just about reducing vacant properties in terms of the already constructed vacant properties, but it also addresses vacant lots, and it addresses infill new development that needs to occur, whether or not that is new construction for home ownership or multifamily construction, or what the communities have as well for green space, and ensuring that we have the funding to maintain those lots and that there's a maintenance plan for those lots as well.
Thank you.
There was a question about commercial area inspections before. Are there special aspects or things that are unique to inspecting commercial establishments, commercial properties that are uniquely different from residential inspection that deem some sort of special training and knowledge base?
I'm going to have Deputy Commissioner Booker answer that, and then also, depending upon the commercial establishment, we also have SIU under Deputy Hessler that looks at commercial establishments also for use violations and zoning violations, but between the two of them.
Councilman, the answer is no, from a property maintenance standpoint. Property maintenance is property maintenance, regardless of whether it's commercial or whether it's residential. With respect to anything zoning, I'll yield to Deputy Hessler.
And my question is more about not and stuff, but like other aspects of inspections.
Sure. So initially, when a property is coming online as a commercial property, there are different standards under the code for between residential and commercial. Adequate entrances, exit signs, depending on what business it is, what they need to meet, accessibility issues. So that's when before the store or whatever it is opens. And that would be more on the building and trade side and the permits that are applied for. Once the store's open and operating, it does fall more to the zoning kind of issues and then just any kind of general nuisance issues. So Special Investigations Unit does respond to service requests related to any kind of zoning violations. That includes signage, not the proper use permit on the property or going beyond their use permit, outdoor dining, with auto shops, all the various things that go on with auto shops, tires, those kinds of things. They do business checks in coordination with fire department and where appropriate, the health department, and sometimes the liquor board. And these are business checks that happen during normal business hours. And then they also go out on the weekends as part of the social club task force with the police department and others.
So in terms of that initial use and occupancy kind of inspection, do we have inspectors for that are uniquely trained or skilled for the purpose of inspecting commercial, or are all of our inspectors just kind of one size fits all in doing residential and commercial?
Yeah, the building inspectors do the final inspections on the use and occupancy, and they're, as you would say, one size fits all. They're assigned to districts and they inspect what comes up in their districts, whether it's a single-family house, an apartment building, or a commercial establishment.
We hear that inspections of commercial establishments are a challenging point of trying to get new businesses operating in Main Street areas. I mean, that's who we hear from, I think, the most, and it's not, I'm hearing from it, not just from my Main Street, but from other Main Streets elsewhere in the city. And I guess it does really seem like there could be a need for specialized commercial inspectors. If there was somebody who could be tasked to doing business inspections in Main Street areas where one of the deficiencies I think we have in the Main Streets office in the city is like lack of kind of just like designated expediters for critical city services in order to get businesses up and going. That's kind of where the Main Streets directors of the 9 Main Streets around the city act as kind of a liaison with businesses to try to make things work for them. And we're struggling to make things work, and we're finding and hearing that it's the inspection to get the UNO that's hanging people up, or that there's just often running into things that are unique to commercial things that seem like it's a shortcoming in the inspector's knowledge base or something. I guess, is there any possibility of just having, even 1 or 2 people designated specifically as commercial inspectors?
I think we need to study that a little bit to see what that volume looks like and whether or not it makes sense, because I could see a scenario where having a dedicated commercial person or 2 could actually slow things up for people, because they're now spread out across the entire city doing all that commercial stuff and not able to cover it all. So there is definitely on our side an understanding of the need to assist businesses and get legal businesses up and running and paying taxes and supporting the communities, and so we do make an effort to do that. So I'm happy to discuss with you idea offline of how something like this could happen.
And it's not made easier by the fact that we have these urban renewal plans that may have unique provisions that apply to one commercial corridor in the city that don't apply to literally any other block in the entire city of Baltimore. And I think that that's probably something that is run up against by some of the Main Streets, because generally these URPs overlap with the Main Street districts. One size fits all just seems like, it's good, but also like some sort of specialty expertise may be necessary as well.
No, I'll follow up with Deputy Hessler, and I think that there's an opportunity to learn more, because I'm one right now that has questions like, what is it that is being missed or that isn't understood? Like, what is the actual component or item, and how is it best to address that in the scope of what's needed? So, of getting the use and occupancy permit.
I will ask Scott to set up a meeting for us and folks who can shed some more robust firsthand experience on this, help us get a handle on it. That will be in addition to the other email I just sent Scott a few minutes ago about the thing that I was asking about before related to the light program. I think we've got something to uncover there and unpack so that we can understand what's going on to unstick some things. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Again, thank you, Commissioner Kennedy and your staff. I'd heard anecdotally that we sometimes have challenges with collecting fines. Could you just walk me through the process by which we collect on fines, either on the commercial or residential side?
Yep. So fines come in a fines or fees related to violations come in a couple different flavors. A violation notice itself doesn't directly carry a fine. So that violation notice, if not corrected, it's a notice in order. So if not corrected, it opens up for the agency to be able to issue a citation for failing to abate that notice, or taking the property to litigation, or taking corrective action, which is often commonly the cleaning and boarding of properties. But it could also, we go out and take off porch roofs that are falling down, oriels that are damaged, rear additions, sheds, those kinds of things. When we do that type of work, the cost, not a fine or a fee, but the cost of doing that work is billed to the property owner and becomes a lien on the property. Citations are most similar to parking tickets. So if an inspector sees that there's any kind of sanitation violation, that could be a citation, work without a permit, not registering, not licensed. There's a number of things, and we've worked with your office on the rental bill to expand that to include interior violations or in troublesome rental properties. So those citations, if issued to the property owner, because it's a violation that the property owner is responsible for, those they have 30 days to request a hearing, or really 26 days to request a hearing, or 30 days to pay the citation. If they don't, then that property goes in, after 90 days, the property goes into default. And that fine will end up being increased by up to $1,000 or tripling, whatever is appropriate. So if it's a $50 citation, it goes up to $150. If it is a $1,000 citation, it goes up to $2,000. It doesn't triple. And there's a calculation in there that's a bit more complicated, but ultimately at the end of the day, anything that doesn't go over that $1,000 mark will triple, and anything else just goes up to that $1,000. Those are liens on the property as well. So, and they're could also put the property into tax sale. So it is a strategy that we are using with vacant buildings, with the failure to pay, failure to abate violations, citations, or vacant building notices. And then with work without a permit, we issue those $500 citations for work without a permit, but then we also, under the code, are required to put in a surcharge on the work that was done. That surcharge sits on the permit record and ties the permit record up until it's satisfied. So when the person comes in to get the permit for the work that they did without that permit, they have to pay usually a $1,000 fee. There's a calculation in there as well, as it's $1,000 or a percentage of the cost of the work, the greater of the two, and usually in almost every case, the $1,000 is the greater of the two. So if you're doing work without a permit, you get hit with the $500 citation, which is a lien on the property, and the $1,000 surcharge. When we take properties to court, it really depends on the judge as to what's appropriate, but for most of our vacant buildings, we're taking them to court on a receivership action. So fines don't come into play. We're asking the court to appoint a receiver to auction the property off.
Would you say there are some fines that we're not effectively collecting?
So citations that are issued to tenants or to individuals that, for citations that aren't tied to a property. For example, I call them bandit signs, but the We Buy Houses or other signs that get put in the median strip, sure, those aren't tied to a property. So they're issued to whoever we can find that was responsible or benefiting from that sign. Those generally are not paid because they're not linked up to the property. They're not linked up to a car registration or anything like that. So the only way to force payment on those, if the person doesn't do it, would be for a collections case. And that's something that we do work from time to time with the law department and the finance department to do those. But we usually try to make the juice worth the squeeze. So we go after, if there's, we had a case where there was diabetic strip signs that got posted up all over the city. We figured out who it was and issued a bunch of citations. And then when they weren't paid, we would take that to the law department and say, can we do a collections case because it's $20,000 or $30,000 worth of sign when you combine all the citations. But those are tough because the citations have to be in default, so that's greater than 90 days, but they also have to be less than a year old. So it's a small window of time to identify those, collect it, and then work with the other departments to be effective in doing a collections case.
So other than the We Buy Houses issue, you would say that we are collecting the vast majority of our fees and fines?
Well, any fines that are issued to tenants or to people that's not tied to a property fall into that category of difficult to collect.
So commercial as well?
No, because commercial would be tied to the property.
To the property, right. Got it. All right. Just knowing that we are facing a structural deficit and will be for the foreseeable future, would want to make sure all of our fines and fees are being collected and understand the complexity there as well. Thank you, Mr. Hessler, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Curious to know how the fixed pricing is going. We've got the 90-day coming up soon. To be clear, I've always thought having a fixed price for disposition is important. It shortens the time frame. We're not negotiating back and forth. I think that's amazing. And I've been very clear about some of the other challenges that I've had with the process. So I'm just curious about, for this first initial 90-day period, it was going to be just for Baltimore City residents. So interested to know how many applications have already been received, but, well, from homeowners. I realized that everybody and their mom actually tried to put in an application, but we were only accepting the ones from residents at this particular point. And those who, where the process is in terms of actually being able to sell. And then I have a letter that I meant to send after our last hearing about it, just to ask for specific things in reporting when we do the quarterly. I would like some quarterly reporting after the initial 90-day period, and I will send that separately as a request. But just for right now, where are we in the process?
So I'll just kick off, and then if Kate wants to pick up. But since the day that we started fixed pricing, we've actually received a total of 1,675 total applications or partially started applications, people in doing things. Out of that 1,675, actually 1,207 were specifically, they entered themselves that they were homeowners. So the majority of the applications actually were homeowner applications. Kate, do you want to go through the breakdown in terms of where we are with the 77 and the?
Yeah, so although we got 1,207, as she said, that were homeowner applications, those were not all from Baltimore City residents. So then we had to go further and figure out how many of those were Baltimore City residents. So in the end, once we go through the threshold of checking whether or not they're actually a homeowner, Baltimore City resident, and qualify for the first phase, it was 77 that were Baltimore City residents who were looking to be the primary homeowners. But then, so those moved on to further analysis, and we are now at the point where there's 5, because some of those fell out. Once we actually looked in their applications, they actually were looking to rent properties, even though they indicated they were doing it as their primary residence. Some of them had their finances were not together, and so those fell out. And then we ended up, like I said, with 5, and we're moving forward with 3 of those. Because of those 5, one of them, they already own their primary residence and they didn't have any plans to sell their primary residence, so that disqualified them. And then the other one actually applied for a lot and they wanted a building, so that one fell out. So anyway, so there's 3 moving forward. There's actually going to be 2 homeowner, I think on June 5th. One of them came in this application period. One of them actually came in, because you know we had that group that had came in before it started,
Yeah.
that were being held.
Yeah.
So there's going to be 2, and there's other fixed pricing items that are going to be on BOE on June 5th that are the ones that were submitted before
Right. Mm-hmm.
from open bid.
Mm-hmm.
So those will be on June 5th. So that's where we're at right now. And like you said, we'll start July 1st with opening it up to everybody, and we're still looking for more homeowners that want to, you know, for the next month, Baltimore City residents who want to purchase as primary residents. We did get more of the properties back up on the website, so I know that was an issue, is that since we had this onslaught of applications, they were less properties available, but we're getting those back onto the site, so there are more available now, buildings available.
And also as a follow-up, we are working, this is one of the items that Glenda is working on and will be working on with Kate and her team in terms of also reaching out to the 40-some that made it to that 77 group that didn't fully have all their finances in line, to have conversation, like to figure out how best to serve those persons, to see about how to move them along in the process, whether or not they need credit counseling. You know, we don't really know whether or not it was just not 100% meeting the 90,000 threshold, but what can we do to support these residents to actually move forward. We've had some conversations also with some of our nonprofit partners around providing technical assistance on the construction side for some of the residents as well, because that's the other piece. Undergoing a renovation project is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
One of the nonprofit groups I talk to right now, they're like, we can't take it on now. So we're going to the next one. And, you know, like, we're having those conversations, but it really is a focus is to help anybody that wants to purchase, to renovate, to live in as their primary residence, to realize that dream and that come to reality. So we don't want to just discard the applications that didn't make it through. We really, you know, especially on the finances side, you know, some weren't related to finances, like they wanted to do a rental. Well, maybe we talked to them about coming through this other way for a property, and, you know, do they really want to own a rental, and this is that process. But really on the ones that want to be homeowners, helping them on the finance and getting that together.
Thanks. Yeah, this the other data that I'm looking for also has to do with you know, the after the July 1 timeframe in terms of how that is going in terms of number of properties that are going to be available, lots versus structures, and then who's buying. The other piece is just thinking about what the knowing that even though we're not putting all of the properties that we acquire on the Buying to Be More website, because we're looking at working with communities on some of the whole block approach piece. But, you know, I'm just sort of curious a little bit more about what the time frame is. So once something is acquired through NREM or other means, because we do have other means, when it gets on the website, then, you know, how long is that process? Because we certainly want to move things along with these other properties. Again, I've seen the Buying to Be More process similar to, you know, would help communities like Waverly, where I just have 4 vacant properties, right? They're not city-owned. We're not going through those yet, but whereas, you know, working directly with communities on some of the blocks is a different strategy. So can you talk a little bit about that process of, you know, once it gets through NREM, how long it gets on the website, and then, you know, and then once somebody applies but then doesn't qualify, how long it takes to get on, because once somebody applies, it's 2 weeks, and then you can, yes, sir. So, so that's what I'm interested in, and then I will send you this letter as a request.
Mm-hmm. I'll start on the one,
Commissioner, brief.
Very brief.
And succinct. Thank you.
Brief and succinct. NREM, we can't give you a time because we haven't done those yet. Like, the ones that we're doing are prioritized, majority of them are prioritized for the community, for whole block outcomes or other specific requests that have come through some of the council members for that. So we can't give you a time on that.
I just want to add too, though, that part of the team that we're building out is a planning section that is going to help us figure out and work with the community on those strategies and figuring out which ones will go on to buy into Be More and which ones will be set aside for other projects and things like that. So that's part of the team that we're building out, and I know you already put in that request for that complete breakdown. You'll get more information on that.
Okay, thanks. I'll send you this letter as a request, so just from a reporting standpoint for the buy into Be More strategy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last year, I asked a question about surplus schools and our effort to sell those schools. And just last week, I asked a question of DPW, I'm just getting late, DGS, about how we secure those schools. I'm curious, they mentioned that there's a work group that meets regularly to make sure that we can secure schools and also sell those schools. I'm curious, how has that work group been effective? And what more can we do to make sure that folks aren't breaking into schools, stealing things from schools, living in schools in the in-between period after we vacate that school to eventually sell?
That's an excellent question. I know that we have worked with DGS on securing. They're responsible for doing the securing components, and then part of it aligns with a number of schools that are also thought of for demolition, and having demolition funds available for surplus schools, which is a key component because some of them are not slated necessarily in a planning standpoint for reuse. It is definitely an issue. We do and have helped and assisted as needed as part of a team with Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, DGS, BPD, if we need to look at assisting with vacating a school that's been illegally occupied and has become a danger to the community. The Deputy Commissioner Edwards and her team represent the agency on the Surplus Schools Task Force. Department of Planning takes kind of the lead on that, also from a planning standpoint in partnership with DGS. I don't know, Kate, if you wanted to add anything else.
Yeah, I mean, we actually just met with the Surplus Schools Task Force this week, and one of the discussion topics is that we are looking at how we can revamp that group and make sure that we're coordinating the best we can. We want to put together a really comprehensive memo for the council to also understand all the different steps that we have in the surplus schools. Part of it is we have to get the sales ordinances, and then there's working with the community, and we want to do a lot more of that upfront planning with the community on what people want to actually see in the buildings more upfront before we had kind of a more open RFP process. We've talked about having a more guided RFP process. So we're going to be restructuring that Surplus Schools Task Force and trying to address all those issues and coordinating all together.
That's great. I'm glad you guys are already beginning to work toward the resolution there. I would. How long might we expect to see that memo?
The memo that I was talking about, or the restructuring process?
Yes.
Both.
You just gave me another thing to ask for.
I would say that this was a very initial conversation, so I think fall. I mean, what we talked about was having it prepared for when the new council kind of comes in, and maybe earlier than that, but so maybe fall, winter timeline.
Can we get an update on, let's say, August 1st?
August 1st, just on kind of what our timeline is.
What our timeline is. It may take longer to draft that report, but if I can make an official request for an update on August 1st on where we are with pulling together a broad plan and recommendations on surplus schools. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I just want to clarify to you, the planning department leads kind of the convening and of that group, so we will share this request with our fellow agencies.
I don't care who does it.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it's done.
I'm just providing
Okay.
information.
Yeah, that's fine.
Did Tony Badon leave DHCD? He's at the, what's he doing? He's at the comptrollers?
Tony Badon did leave DHCD, and he is at the comptroller as the deputy director of real estate with Eric Evans.
And is Bill Berge still at DHCD?
Bill Berge is still at DHCD. I love, Bill's probably watching right now. So
A staple, as some would say.
We actually just had a conversation yesterday about doing a project within DHCD of interviewing our legacy employees and talking to them about their experiences within the agency and documenting that for posterity as well as information, which can be grateful. And Bill Berge was the first person that came to mind, and then our code enforcement master, Sarah Scribner, was the second one that came to mind at top.
Okay. Well, hopefully Bill's listening, but if not, you can convey this back to him. I'd like to thank Bill personally for the incredible, and also Kate and you, Alice, for the incredible work on the 800 blocks of Harlem and Edmondson Avenue in Upton and Heritage Crossing. I really believe that what we were able to accomplish there together over the past, this dates back probably 2.5 decades, but really got in motion over the last 5 or 6 years, was really incredible. And Alice, I think you should be commended for the way that you've navigated a complex process in terms of interacting with the community, and you've handled it with efficiency and class and grace that has made me very proud to count you as a partner in what you've done for the Upton community. So I'm deeply grateful for that, and I hope that DHCD will consider the approach that we've taken there as a model for other neighborhoods in the city, and to think about the work on Perkins Alley and how we replicate that instead of, and we kind of used a Band-Aid approach, and every time I called you and said there was a Band-Aid necessary, you found one. But hopefully sometime in the future there's a process set up to deal with that and resources allocated to that, because we allocate resources to a lot of things in the city, and that is one area where we do not properly allocate the necessary resources to accomplish those things. And we all, this isn't directed at the mayor or the president or any member of this council, we all really enjoy taking credit for those things, but we all really should be committed to making sure that those things are funded up front the right way, because they have an incredibly meaningful impact on the quality of life of those legacy homeowners and residents in those neighborhoods. So thank you very much, and please extend my thanks to Bill, and next time you run into Tony at Board of Estimates or whenever, because that project would not have been successful without their help under your and Kate's leadership. Councilman Torrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the commissioner was on an email earlier about this. It's related to Ms. Hart's shop, related to contract administration. I'll be clear. Ms. Hart and her team are small, nimble, and get the work done. I worry about a contract in terms of how the city was delayed in replacing an oil burning furnace because a contract had expired with a specific vendor rather than finding someone else that could do the work in our existing contract. So as someone who did procurement for another agency, my question is, who's monitoring your contracts to make sure that you do not have expired contracts so that we can continue to deliver the quality services that we do for our residents every day? And then 2 parts. What is your next step to prevent this from happening again, right? Yeah. Because a woman was without a furnace since January, right? At our fault. And I say this because more than likely the funds probably are coming from general fund anyway, if she does put a claim against the city. But there was a way that we could fix it internally ourselves without having to go that far. So, one, how are we monitoring them to prevent this? And then how do we make sure we definitely prevent this from happening again?
Unfortunately, there's a couple of things that happened with this specific contract. So one of them is we actually started to work with the Bureau of Procurement on renewing the weatherization. All of this falls under the weatherization contracts, and we're proactively working with them going back to last year, working on the weatherization contract. And unfortunately, this contract was with one of their procurement officers who unexpectedly passed away. And it impacted a number of contracts, not only in our agency, but across the city and other agencies as well. The Bureau of Procurement and Director Manny did what he could do to kind of unravel and pick up while their colleagues were also grieving the unexpected loss of their colleague. And this contract got in the middle of that. And it was actually we had worked with the team, this was under an emergency procurement, and the person on, the resident on Wabash that we're discussing that was on the email before, happened to fall right in the unfortunate sweet spot of between the emergency contract going through because we needed to get that to the approved, and then getting the appropriate components set up in Workday to be able to pay some of the back invoices and be able to do the workload. So this is not how we typically address our procurement issues, especially as it relates to our 3 blanket contracts that we have within the agency. Our 3 blanket contracts are weatherization contractors, lead hazard reduction contractors, and our demolition contractors. And we have those monitored. They know exactly the dates that they expire. We work with procurement on reaching out well in advance to start any process that's needed. And we have proactively had to also, with a number of those other ones, we ended up in emergency situations as well because of the passing of the procurement officer. So this unfortunate issue with this homeowner ended up just being in a situation. We actually did try to pay in other ways or, figure out different components, and there wasn't anyone else because it's under the blanket weatherization contract to be able to do that work at that time. So we will evaluate. We actually had this conversation as a team today to kind of, in terms of crossing T's, dotting I's, to evaluate kind of redundancy and backup of what else could we have done in this issue, as well as with anybody else that was in limbo that got caught in that unfortunate time frame. So
it is very unfortunate, but this is the second time it's happened with your agency, with a contract. And the first instance was when I transitioned on the council from Councilman Pinkett, where I had a woman who was actually trying to get her roof replaced. This is actually the second time it's happened. So that's why I'm bringing up the question about how do we prevent this from happening again. And I get that we're going through procurement reform. I came from an agency where we had blanket POs for certain instances because we just knew we had to fund it and we had to figure out how to pay for it when we did reconciliation, right? Because that was the important thing. I think that this is one instance, but this is the second time it's happened in 3 years, right? So fool me once, fool me twice, right? There has to be a change.
And we're actively working with the procurement office. There's components to that that I know that they're working on, that Director Moxton, Director Manny, the CAO, they're 100% committed in terms of the procurement reform. And there was a point in time, yes, years ago too, that the weatherization contract was delayed and had to go through an emergency procurement. That from an agency standpoint, we were proactive in getting the procurement started. A lot of our procurements actually start anywhere from 8 months to a year, because we're like, this is going to take a long time, so we proactively start on that process. So we will continue to work with the CAO, we'll continue to work with Director Manny, and we will continue to work through those issues.
I hear you, but this contract, the first time, was 3 months out from its expiration date. I'm just being wholeheartedly transparent, because one thing I do love is a receipt, right? This is the second time it's happened. This time it was unfortunate. The first time it was staff error that prevented this, right? So I just want to be clear, like, I would like to know whether and I'll make this a request as well with my staff at home. I would like to know what steps the administration are taking to prevent this, because while we are professionalizing our procurement office and doing the reforms, these things can't happen. Having someone use space heaters to keep their home warm when they were promised something by the city of Baltimore after a sewage back up into their home. I like the comfort and safety of my home. In the first contract that this happened with, it was an elder who had a hole in her roof and it would rain, and she had mold because of it, because we took too long. Those are two vulnerable people. So I think we have to really think this through, that this can't happen again with the administration of contracts, right? So I just want to make sure by August 1st that we have an answer for how you're going to prevent this with finance as well as procurement, because two vulnerable people were put in situations where their health and safety were in jeopardy because we promised them something.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Permit office. So in the budget book, it says that the new permit office wouldn't roll out and all the technology and everything that you're doing, and I verified that with CEO Leach during her testimony, that it wouldn't be rolled out until like the second half of 2025. And we had a hearing today with the fire department, and Chief Eames was like, oh no, we're getting this done by the end of the year, beginning of next year. So can you clarify kind of what is happening and what is the timeline that we should be looking at for this?
There's a misprint in the budget book, so we don't know actually how that happened. We're on track and have been on track for the continued time of December 2024. I think Chief Eames said January 1 of 2025 at the hearing this afternoon.
He said end of the year, beginning of next, like that little time.
Which is essentially December.
Yeah.
By the end of December, the team meets daily, and that's a coordinated effort between BSIT, fire, us, other agencies that have been involved as well. And we're on track for that implementation, for that component. There's other pieces that have come up that we will continue to kind of look in as a phased-in approach, but the full, new system and release and all of the training and outreach, education, not only of staff, testing, and more testing, outreach, everything is already lined up for the rest of this summer into the fall, and then the release in December.
That's good news, because I was frustrated with reading in the book that it was going to be later. I want to just make sure that it's not just the technology that's going to roll out. We had talked about with the CAO about the fact that we needed a whole in, out, up, down, backwards, forwards, everything look at everything that's going on in the permit office to make sure that we're reforming literally everything so that Ms. White does not have to hear from me ever again, although she will. But I have to email her a lot to try to intervene, to try to get stuff done. And she's been very responsive and very good. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at everything, every little tiny bit of the process, every little tiny bit of the timeframes for inspections, every little bit of every inspector and what they're doing, everything to be able to get this done.
So even leading up to, before we even started on technology, we did a review of office, we did a review of workflows, we did a review of kind of operations, because we needed to look at that and see where that was in order to inform also what we needed on the technology side and where we could also align staff with the new technology. So I would say, yes, this has included that review of staffing and so forth. We've also made changes recently with in partnership with BSIT around phones and answering of phones and kind of going to a call center model. So that has...
We got a full briefing on that from the CEO. And
so that has
was
decreased and increased the call answering volume, because our staff, as we've said in other hearings, our staff is doing on the call, making calls, processing permits, et cetera. So we've seen a significant increase in call answering related to that. And so we are looking at every aspect of this. We've talked, with Deputy Hessler and his team about inspections, time of inspections, for building building inspections, we're still scheduling within that 24 next day time period. Some of the mechanical is taking a little bit longer, but building inspections are scheduling in for that 24 time period. So I think that we're going to see a significant amount just in terms of both staff on the internal side. This is something that we know from the technology side, that it'll be a better efficiency for us internally as well as externally. But we did do evaluation of operations that needed to inform even how we were looking at the technology. Mm-hmm. So they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. And with that, is there somebody that's what I think you had talked about at some point in time, the navigator for those folks who accidentally, through no fault of their own, bought a house with a BBN on it and need to go through the process to get a UNO?
That position is posted now as well. So not everybody even with some things, it's like having permit and building experience. So if you know anybody, it is posted. We're actively hiring for that. And Deputy Hessler and his team has been working through assisting those residents moving from purchasing a property with a UNO with a VBN to getting their use and occupancy permit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Deputy Commissioner Hessler. Hessler. My situation on Riverside Avenue, where are we at on that? You emailed me on Friday, May 24th. This was the legal notice, the show cause hearing for the restaurant that had outdoor seating.
Right. I think contact's been made with them as to what needs to be done. They either need to remove the seating or get the permit to allow the seating. So I think our legal department was reaching out to them again to explain all that, and we'll work with them. Like I said in the email, that case, we can hold off on the case even though it's filed in order to give them time to get that corrective action, and the corrective action makes the case go away.
Could you do me a favor, and before we leave chambers this evening, email that group thread and explain that that's what we're going to do? This one situation has been wildly frustrating for me and all the other verbs and feelings for the restaurant owner. And that's not necessarily a reflection of you or anyone at DHCD, but there are multiple emails with DOT right-of-way division. And for a restaurateur who had an entitlement that existed during the pandemic for outdoor seating, to not know who to be able to go to between DOT and housing and zoning has been, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this one, Faith.
I'm not, but what I would offer are my services. So in this case, because of the multiple agencies that are involved, you come to me, my team will work with DOT, DHCD to make sure that it's resolved so that it doesn't take multiple emails to resolve an issue like this. So in this case where there's may not be a clear person, just come to the CAO's office.
So I'm going to ask that when Jason responds explaining that he copies you on the thread with all of us. So this goes to the process question. When there's an instance where there's a code enforcement complaint or whatever, however you want to characterize it, related to outdoor seating, where clearly there's another agency, in this instance DOT, who has purview over this entitlement, does DHCD legal check with DOT first to get the background to understand what's going on?
Not usually, because with DOT for outdoor seating in a restaurant on the sidewalk, they would need to have a right-of-way permit as part of our permit process, but we're really looking at our permit process. So I don't know that we didn't have the knowledge that they had applied or tried to get something from DOT. And I think there were conversations in January with the owner and perhaps your office to try and clear all this stuff up, and that was well before anything was filed. But normally for this, it would be, they're operating and they don't have our permit. In order to get our permit, they would have to get a right-of-way permit, and it's completely separate from that parklet permit for.
Well, this was a sidewalk. This was not a.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, because DOT has the separate program for the parklets and all that, so we don't really look at that because it's a sidewalk and they need to come to us. And
but it's DOT that issues the. It's DOT that issues the permit for the outdoor seating on the sidewalk, correct?
They issue the right-of-way permit that allows it to be used, and then we issue the use permit to do the activity. And in their instructions on their right-of-way permit, it does address that they need to contact housing to get a use permit.
Well, God bless you to whoever that was that sneezed. I didn't see.
And this issue doesn't come up very much.
Right. No, I get it. This one's unique. Well, I'll say that and I plan to raise this extensively tomorrow afternoon with DOT, extensively, that we were able to come up with a solution in the summer of 2020 that made this process seamless and a lot easier for everyone involved, especially city agencies. And I know you were in that group of 9 with me that did this. And it's gotten, unfortunately, vastly more complicated and lost in city bureaucracy. None of that's directed at you, but I'm sure you can appreciate that DHCD does play a role in this process and that it is now complicated. And I hope that DHCD can help uncomplicate the process for our constituents.
Yep. That was definitely one of our concerns with that meeting of 9 as to how it would play out after the emergency was over. But we're definitely committed to work with your office, with DOT, with the constituents to clear it up.
I certainly appreciate that. So if you can copy the CAO and the reply all on that, that'd be appreciated. Conway.
Last question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the issues we see not infrequently is squatters. And I'm curious what role the department plays in managing that as an issue, as a problem. What are the squatters' rights, and how does HCD interface in managing that problem?
So I'd like to make a clarifying question.
Sure.
Because squatters can be defined in two different ways. So one is someone occupying an illegally occupying a vacant property with a vacant building notice.
That's what I'm talking about.
As a squatter. Okay. So we actually, DHCD acts as the coordinating agency addressing squatters. It's a comprehensive, coordinated effort across agencies. It's run under Deputy Booker with Assistant Commissioner Goldring and the Special Operations Unit, and they coordinate that across agencies, including Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, BPD, DPW, DOT, BGE, Health Department. Deputy Booker, do you want to add anything on that?
You on a roll, I'm applause.
And that's the, in the previous testimony that Deputy Booker provided to a question that Councilwoman Porter asked, that's where we've seen an increase in the number. That last calendar year we did, I think it was 70 vacates, and this calendar year to date we've already done 74. Is that? Okay.
Good. Is there anything more that we could do, or things that we as council members can consider when we come across these issues? Is anything we can do in advance when we know we have vacant properties, or how do we handle with these issues? Because as you know, very often when a squatter gets into a home, it could take months to go through the legal proceedings to get them out of that home. Well, then, if I am wrong in that regard, tell me how to fix it, because I've been stuck in that situation a handful of times.
That's why I asked about the clarifying question, if it was specific to properties with the vacant building notice versus a person that has entered a property that is in foreclosure, and where someone has gained entry, changed the locks, and is now living in a property that is tied to a bank or somewhere in a foreclosure proceeding, and they're just chilling in a house that they're not paying any rent or mortgage for. So they are two completely different processes and two completely different components from a legal standpoint.
Maybe I've been dealing with that one where it's bank owned, or maybe not even bank owned, it's owned by a person who maybe just hasn't sold it yet, and we end up in those situations. And those, I'm guessing, are the ones that take longer.
Well, and those are the ones that we actually don't get involved in.
Okay. Well, then I'm asking the wrong people. Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Torrance.
Thank you. I'll start off with something great. I just want to thank you guys for consolidating the lots in time before June for Cab Callaway Park. I know that was a big lift on your agency. Now here's my next big lift for you. In the comprehensive housing plan, something I noticed that was not consistent when we talk about it. How do we create density in areas to get access to grocery stores? And I think that's something that the agency, as well as us as the city, even excluding myself, needs to think through about how do we build density in historically redlined communities and bring wealth to those areas, because it is I think in terms of planning, we have to be equitable in planning to make sure that we're creating that amenity. While we are creating a park, in Druid Heights, I have people who are still having to catch the subway to Mondawmin to get food, right? I think that we need to figure out, even whether it's small international stores, but we have to create ways in development as a city to plan the developments in a way in the comprehensive housing to attract the right incomes, the right persons in mixed income communities, as well as the employment opportunities that then equates to the opportunity for a grocery store in our neighborhoods. But it's the one thing I know is that we haven't really consistently said across the board. I've been harking with planning about it. I've been harking with private developers about it. But I think as a city, we have to plan for it ourselves.
I would say we agree with you, and we'll continue to work with planning department and the communities on that. I know that in some of our communities, they actually don't want density, and they don't want more density. And that has come up, yes, in Druid Heights and in other, or around. So I think that we need to collectively have a continued conversation on it, but we do understand the correlation between density, between business opportunity, between what is attractive to a grocery store, whether or not it be a large one or a small one, and what a business needs to be able to sustain itself. And that is part of the work that we do, and I think that we consider that as a key component to this. When we talk about the work isn't just about a physical structure, it isn't just about the residential side, it's about the people, the humans, the people that work there, live there, play there, that need to eat there, that need to have the components that make their community whole. And we also look at that those things should not be considered amenities, that these are things that are just something that communities need to have as any community would have. So, I don't, people know this, I don't like to talk about lighting or green space or clean alleys or grocery stores or business opportunities or small businesses and cafes or bookstore, whatever you call it, that is an amenity for a community. Those should be, and what we should strive for as just the standard for all of our communities.
And I wholeheartedly agree with you, because I have this battle with my own residents in discussing how do we create those opportunities, especially now that we are going to have Cab Callaway Park. How do we create even a farmers market, right? Because that's something that we have been looking at. Now that we're getting healthcare institutions in West Baltimore, how do we then expand our access to providing prescriptions for food? Because the affordability has gone up so high, let's have healthcare cover it. I think it is a human right. I think as a city, people are looking at our documents and seeing where to go next. I can tell you from just the fact that people are scared about a vacancy tax. I have a number of people renovating homes without permits right now in Sandtown, Winchester, because they're scared that they're gonna have to pay a vacancy tax soon from the city of Baltimore. So I think that while we are making actions, I think we have to make those moral statements that we are planning to create the density and opportunities in these locations, because people are paying attention now.
600 block of East Clement Street in Riverside. Is anyone familiar with the Clement Street Caverns? Anyone heard that? Clement Street Caverns? Yes, it dates back to the 1950s or 1960s. It's urban legend that there's a network of tunnels that connect Federal Hill Park to Fort McHenry, dating back to the War of 1812 for munitions transport. So on the 600 block of East Clement Street is a parcel that's owned by the city of Baltimore. Parking Authority is the responsible agency. It's a small surface parking lot. There were a number of row homes, I don't know, a handful, 4, 5, 6, that all collapsed into the ground into a 50 or 60 foot sinkhole sometime in the 50s or 60s, plus or minus. There's a surface lot there that it has been including, there's a surface lot as well as sidewalk in front of an adjacent property that has started to depress rapidly. We have reached out to Parking Authority. As much as I happen to like and respect Pete Little, I think this is a little beyond his scope or expertise. While we have Faith here, because we have interagency issues, what support, if any, could DHCD provide? I know that you all were very helpful at the early phases of the Federal Hill Park slippage on the east side of the park, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I don't even know what tool one uses to figure out if there's a cavern in the ground where that's not something you buy on Amazon.
Sure. So to answer the question, and against my better instincts, having gone to law school and not engineering school, I would say we would need to engage an engineer. There are tools that they would use, ground penetrating radar and other things, to try to determine what's going on there, and then come up with a plan of action. Because it could be natural depression that, just over time, or it could, it'd be groundwater, or it could be the caverns like you're suggesting.
And I'm not suggesting it is the caverns. I'm just giving the background on the site as to why residents are very concerned.
Absolutely. And now I'm deeply interested and will be investigating the caverns.
I have about as much of an engineering background as you do, Jason.
Is it possible for you to follow up if it's a specific address?
606 East Clement Street.
It's the 606, it's the home, okay.
All over it.
So I just got a nod from Faith, which means I'm going to copy her on an email.
Yes, thanks. I will pull together a group of folks, and we can actually go to the site and take a look. One point of personal privilege, Scott Davis, I am so surprised at you for not knowing. He is our city historian.
I agree with that statement. I just turned to him and said, he's our resident historian. He should know more about the caverns.
On that note, I'll take a moment of privilege too. Jason, if you recall, 1702 to 1708 Light Street, known as Victory House. When the developer came in after it was during the demolition, they found a retaining wall in the rear that went at least 36 feet deep in the ground. They didn't dig any further than that. They had no idea how far it went, but I think they ended up having a historian come in and suggested it could be something related to something 1812-ish, but whatever. All right, I digress. I'm going to get you all, Jason, and is Jason the appropriate person? Okay.
I'm already starting the email with everybody on it.
Okay. Okay. So can you do me a favor, me, Faith, include Pete Little on it, or just for visibility? And Nancy, if you let our folks know. Thanks. Thank you. Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Might I suggest adding our good friend Sherrod Hicks from DPW, who has been working on many sinkholes, one big one in particular in my district, and he's got all these crazy tools that he's using. So I would suggest that as well. And to my colleague from the 7th, the way that we're designing the vacancy tax bill, it would have exemptions depending on, we don't want people to pull permits and then hold the property and keep keep doing just re-upping the permits, but if you're actually doing the work, you wouldn't have to end up paying the tax. So let's talk about ARPA for DHCD. And I'm extremely concerned about the minimal spend so far with Tivoli. I understand completely what's going on there. I understand. I'm working with you on trying to figure out how that's all going to work, and I appreciate your staff's time in dealing with that situation, and look forward to continuing the work on that. I'm particularly concerned about hubs spending and about the IIA 15 million spending. So on hubs, it's my understanding that there's 9 partners in the hub network. They're all getting about $412,000, give or take a couple $100. which is about 3.6 million, and they'll be able to work directly with contractors to do the home repair work that each of the network partners does. What is the plan for the other 7 million, the other remaining of that, which is a little under 4 million, to be able to get that money out the door? I would also want to advocate for our hubs partners that they need operating dollars in order to get the money out the door. Mostly, you know, being able to, there's a bottleneck in terms of, like you said with Light the other, you know, earlier today, it's lots of cases, not very many people being able to work on them. So if you could tell us what the plan is to be able to do the rest of that money for spend, and then also the 15 million for the impact investment areas, that would be super.
Sure, I'll pick up and then turn to Deputy Commissioner Hart on some of it. So one, for Hub specifically, it's 7 million, and then in the budget there's actually around 2 million for staff costs. So they've actually been doing work on application processing, et cetera. So then it brings it down to about 5 million, and then we've had internal cases that we've actually been applying Hub's money to and spending Hub's money on and internal cases, and then do you want to give the breakdown of the 7?
Yeah, I'll give you the total breakdown on the 7 million. So it was 1,413,500 was committed to Robert Half. So that included staffing for rehab tech, social service coordinators, and office support to be able to push those cases through. We had $91,285 that was associated with supplies, software licenses, equipment, things of that nature. Actual grants to homeowners was $5,451,526. So $1,650,000 are the sub grants to the Hub leadership. Well, so of that $1,650,000, there were 4 grants of $412,500 that went to the Hub's leadership sites. So that's specific to Civic Works, GHHI, Rebuilding Together, and NHS. And then another $1,500,000 went to the other 5 sites. So those were 5 grants of $300,000. So that was Meals on Wheels, High, Keswick, Banner, and St. Ambrose. So as of 4/30/24, DHCD had internally spent $626,017.13, and then that left a balance of $1,675,508.87 for internal spend for DHCD cases that are in the weatherization, rehab, and lead departments. And so based upon the $25,000 grant award, that would only leave money for 67 cases. And so internally, we have 167 cases in the work scope phase that would be eligible for this funding.
Need to get that all in a list in writing. So
okay.
I'll make that formal request to have the accounting for the Hub's 7 million, just as you had explained it. And just want to make sure that all of that is accounted for. And then the 15 million?
Yep. And I want to also just quickly say on the operating side that we've actually supported very recently. We didn't provide it, but we were supportive in making connections on it and getting a Hub's operating grant upwards of $200,000 for the operating side.
Not enough.
So
it's not enough.
We know, but it meets part of the need that was described to us by the Hubs network for this next fiscal year. So we worked with them on what their need was and where to come up with that. So.
I just think that we've got such a backlog right now that utilizing some of the ARPA money for operating just to be able to get those monies out the door and help more people would be the way to go. I realize that we don't always want to use ARPA money for positions. I just think we're in a situation where we just got to spend this money. So I would you know, advocate for that. So, okay, tell me about the 15 million.
Yeah, and on the 50 million side, we have a number of properties that are actually in the acquisition stage. So that is close to $3 million in terms of breakdown of acquisition that are in the BOE process or have already gone to settlement or have been referred to the law department. So once settlement happens is when the actual money will be spent and hit the books. So there's a significant number of properties associated with that, which is over 81 properties on the acquisition side. We've already started demolition, and there's been demolition charges actually for impact investment areas as well that have been made. There's been ARPA funding that has supported the operation side of this. So we've actually had ARPA funding supporting some of the staff components to the work. We've had ARPA funding that supported title work, appraisals, those components and spend there, as well as staff spend that has come up on that piece, and also in terms of stabilization as well. So I think it might be best for us to just provide you with that. We also have the developer incentives that have actually been executed. A number of those contracts have been executed. We had applications come in and moving those out for the impact investment areas as well. So the funding is moving, and there's accounting for all of the funding in terms of activities within the IIAs.
Yeah, I'll make that a request, and I'll send it to you just to have those two items, the 15 million for the impact investment areas and the hubs money in terms of the accounting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick because I want to get home. The Western Impact area, near and dear to my heart because they are historically red-line communities, as well as the Civil Rights Act was written in the actual impact area, just to be transparent. Here's my next question. There's lots of action happening in that zone, but around it, there's additional support that's needed. Have we really thought about a strategy that we can put in place, whether it be with us and private or philanthropy, to help those areas surrounding it? Because what I'm seeing is that in some areas, the market isn't coming to terms. I'll put it like this. I'll give you an example. If I walk over to Sandtown Winchester, right, while we're doing all these nice things in Upton and Druid Heights, there's becoming an overwhelming desire to have that just move over a few blocks to help extend to those neighborhoods. Administration to build a new Lillian Jones, we are creating another asset in the community that we can do similar to what we're doing in Penn North and building around that. I think that harkens the conversation, and I think and I'm just putting it out there, like, have we thought about what we can do within a quarter mile of the impact zone in certain neighborhoods?
Yes, we have, and those are part of all of the planning and coordination work that Chief Rubens has been a part of, and that we've been putting together as it goes to look at the areas outside of the impact investment areas. We've been using a terminology called community asset building areas, specifically kind of as you just stated, like there's now a new asset that we should build off of, as well as the idea that we're building off of the strength of the impact investment areas. So when the impact investment areas were looked at and geography was created, it was done on a data-driven approach that looked at assets within those communities and where we were and the investment that was already happening, plans that were already happening, parks, recreation, et cetera, and building off of those assets within those communities. So we do have another data-driven approach that is looking at the areas adjacent to the impact investment areas and including those in the planning efforts and moving forward. So an example would be Sandtown Winchester, it would be Harlem Park, it would be Darley Park, it would be Yeah, the North Avenue.
Curtis Bay and Brooklyn are also.
Right. Curtis Bay, Brooklyn, West North Avenue Development Authority, Catchment Zone, and others. So we have been thinking about that, and we would be happy to talk with you more about it.
I'll throw a wrench into it because adjacent to Lillian Jones is Gilmore Homes. This is something I've had conversations with HABC about. The federal government allows people to cash in their voucher and get upwards to $30,000 in a down payment on a home. And the federal government supplements 25% of that mortgage for the first 10 years. There are opportunities for persons who have left the city of Baltimore with such vouchers to come back in our city and purchase homes from either the city of Baltimore or in our impact zones. I would like, as a committee request, that we partner with HABC in helping them with getting people through that pilot, because in the past 3 years, only one person has successfully gone through that pilot. And there are over 7,000 people that qualify for this, right? I think that that is a growth area that we are missing out on, especially with federal funding. If we know that if we get them into a home, it is cheaper on the federal budget, but also allows us to allow someone who has always rented and looked for affordable housing to have an affordable home and have wealth. I think this is the thing that we have to navigate, especially since we're using federal funds to help people with being first-time home buyers. This is something that we need to grow at.
I agree with you 100% on that. It's something that I have attempted over the years to work with the Housing Authority on. At one point in time, the staff member, the HABC staff member that kind of was running the homeownership component of the program, the Housing Choice Voucher Homeownership Program, her office was actually on the 11th floor within, like, around the Office of Homeownership, so that we could try to coordinate on down payment and closing cost assistance and the other attributes that are available to get people in. We did targeted outreach. We did focus groups. We tried to do focus groups with city residents. So I believe that there is opportunity there, and we will definitely look at ways to increase that partnership and push on having and supporting residents to take advantage of that program.
Here's my committee request. Can we work with our federal delegation to influence HABC as well as us to partner together, as they are a federal agency? Because this is becoming an emergent issue. I say that because the success we're having with Perkins, I say this as the grandson of someone whose family was displaced by EBDI, a person who's lived in Baltimore and lived in public housing, who's been homeless. I think we are missing the mark, and the fact that we just no longer have an agency combined in another agency is stopping this. I think we need to really move in a way that's meaningful, because we're missing our mark, because if our market takes off, these people will not be able to afford to live in Baltimore City or to return to the very city.
So
this is a request for us to...
Point well taken. But the request is a little bit outside of the scope of Commissioner Kennedy's at the responsibility, authority, et cetera. Could we, why don't we make that a request for the CAO and the mayor to get back to you on what the strategy is to engage the Maryland federal delegation on next steps. That work for everyone? All right. Marguerite, you good? No? Okay. Torrance is requesting something from we'll say the CAO and the chief of staff on how they're going to engage the Maryland federal delegation related to his concerns with HABC and coordination with DHCD. Is that good? All right, great. You good? Excellent. Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question about the community catalyst grants. They're reduced to $1 million rather than $2 million in the budget. And so I'm curious why. And also, have we been more successful in reducing the time that, contracts are sent out to recipients? Because I know that was one of the challenges we've had in the recent past.
So one of the things that we did on the community catalyst was actually to align the budget with actual spend. So that was something that we've been looking at over the years with BBMR and carryovers and a number of different things. So we wanted to align it with actual spend and being able to move the funding out in a timely manner and align it with a yearly budget and change, because there were times when some of the organizations were on a 2-year or a 3-year cycle and some different components, so we wanted to align that and move that forward. And yes, we have had the Community Catalyst grant grants now follow the same process as the CDBG grants. So they now fall in line in terms of doing a group of them go to the BOE at once for approval based on the approval letters, et cetera, and then are able to be executed. So we've implemented that same process on the CCG grants as the CDBG.
So the reduction to $1 million is because the groups that were chosen didn't spend their money, or was it because they were? I mean, I would posit that they weren't spending their money because they weren't getting the contracts to then be able to do the work. Remember, it was taking a long time, as you know, to get the contracts. I mean, I think that we need to, because all of the groups that get these, you know, it's not like they don't need the money.
So it wasn't on the CCG side that we had a contracting issue. The contracting issue was on the CDBG side.
No, that's not what I had heard from other grantees.
Well, we have not had a delay in. The biggest one on the Community Catalyst where there has been delay is on the capital side, not on the operating side. And if anything, on the operating side, it was potentially getting some additional information from grantees, et cetera. But we've moved the CCG to the same format just because it's cleaner, simpler, faster for everybody involved. But we haven't had an issue on that. So we align that based on spend and other pieces.
Got it. I would say that there's still obviously a lot more need for money. $2 million wasn't enough to begin with anyway. So I'd be curious a little bit more about what exactly, why people weren't spending that money, in terms of whether it was, the project wasn't ready, what was it that was doing that? Because I'd hate to go down to $1 million and then we need more, and now we can't because we adjusted the budget to have less funding.
I think the biggest delay is actually on the capital side with projects, but with this, it was also just spend on moving funds. So we were trying to align it with, what that spend would look like.
Do you think that it would be going up to $2 million at some other time after you realign it?
I can't predict for other budget years, but yes, I would potentially hope that we could do that, or as you said, go even higher. So I can't predict what we would look at for the future budget years, but this is where we are right now.
Okay, thanks.
I'm good.
Thank you. I was curious about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I have not asked, which I normally do, so this is my fault. Finance, I usually ask them every beginning of the fiscal, the budget time, how much money is in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund now. So I would like that information. And it is a non-lapsing fund, so it would be great to get what was earned this fiscal year, which I actually think is in the budget book, but then also what's currently in there. And then looking at if you could provide to us, Commissioner, the various allocations. I know that they go through a spending plan each year, and then the funds are allocated as such. So if you could provide us with that information, that would be super. And then, which would include like how many units of rental we've been able to add to pay for it all. It's part of a capital stack. So, but what does that look like, as well as home ownership? I think it's the same indicators that you normally use for the trust fund. And has there been, as part of the legislation, we ask for an audit every 4 years of the trust fund. So when is that scheduled?
I know, I would have to talk.
Yeah,
check with Kate.
I think
know that we've talked about the engagement on the audit.
Yeah, it's in process, but I'd have to get back to you on the exact timeline on when it will be done, but we have engaged an outside party to begin the audit, so I can get the timeline for you.
We wouldn't use the comptroller's office in this case in terms of the audit feature, the audit performance audits there?
No, I think it has to be a third party.
It has to be a third, I wrote it, so I probably shouldn't. Oh, good point. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yep. So that would be great to know that as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And I'll put all these requests. Yeah, I was requesting information on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the allocations and the.
Why don't we just put that in writing to Marguerite?
Sure
Copy
will.
me, copy Dexter.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes. I had a question about there was a statement in the executive summary, page 132, that says that the law department maintains 3 lawyers for the in-rem work on the vacant property strategy, and the agency detail, page 317, says that those are also shared with OECR. Can you explain that? Because I was hoping that in-rem lawyers are not shared with anybody. That we have them just for in-rem.
We don't, the law department does not have, we don't share in-rem attorneys.
Okay.
With anyone.
Mm-hmm. And then they're shared with OECR, page 317. Let me see if I can find it. I'll find it and get back to you. But if you're not sharing with, you shouldn't be sharing with anybody else. We're going to be selfish about this. Okay. All right. I'll find the page and make sure that that's corrected for future books. I have a couple more. Thank you. Commissioner, we've talked a little bit about this. I am hoping that we're starting to get to a point with when there's a private sale of a vacant property and there might be a large water bill that's attached to it. Maybe somebody bought it in the lien and tax sale, foreclosed on the lien, but then because you have to wait 2 years to be able to foreclose, that's the current law now, that the water bill and the taxes go back up. And we have a couple of cases like that in my district. I think what we need to do is just release those liens so that the transaction can occur. Again, this is just for vacant properties. So where are we on coming up with that? Because we're going to need it also when we're starting to talk about the vacancy tax.
So that was something that we had been working on with DPW, and it is on my agenda for the meeting with the new DPW director to pick back up to formally kind of finalize what a process would be for that. But we had gone through a couple of different iterations with DPW on what that could look like and where to go, and we will continue to pick that up. I have been working specifically with Deputy CAO Simone Johnson on that. She was acting as a lead on that, so I'll coordinate with the CAO's office on that coordination as well. But it was moving, and Acting Director Luna had some questions about it, and now with the new director, we want to just finalize it.
So can I get what the plan will be and the status and all of that in the next couple of months? You'll be working through that with them?
Yeah, I think I need to talk with Director Zaid and come up with, he needs to be brought fully up to speed and have time to review. So we're actively working on that, but I don't want to commit to a time frame without talking with him first.
Okay, well, I'll check back in with you, but I do want to have, make sure that we're moving forward on that, because there's other circumstances where there's just large bills that we want the house to get redone, and so we want to make sure that that gets done. But also relative to lien release, when we are dealing with vacancy tax, if somebody again is, going to buy the property, it's got very large liens, and yes, we would rather have they all go into in-rem. It's not all going to happen that way, but we're going to need to have a very strong process relative to lien release, which we're allowed to do because we're authorized to do that through the General Assembly, so that transactions can occur. So that'll also be part of the discussion with water bills, but also with the taxes, which we do lien release with the taxes anyway through receivership, for receivership cases in a lot of cases also. I had a question also about capacity building strategy. So one of the things that we really need to make sure happens is that we've got, as you know, great partners in our communities, both on the development side and also on the community organizing side. I think this is something that I think we've talked about since I was at CDN in terms of, what is that strategy and funding from the city to make sure that those community partners, which are vital to our vacancy strategy, will be getting that capacity to do what they need to do. It's funding and also, in some cases, technical assistance. In some cases, it's mentoring, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Right. I'm just saying that I think that I would like to get a strategy on that. What's the city strategy to make sure that we're building that capacity?
So one of the first components of there's several different pieces of that strategy. One of the first ones is in partnership with the planning department, we have started a city-sponsored community development corporation roundtable, and we had the first meeting of that 2 months ago now? Yeah. 2 months ago. And they're meeting on a quarterly basis. We had an excellent, I think, kickoff meeting. We're working with them, specifically asking them the questions of what barriers have they had, what do they need for technical assistance, what do they need for capacity building. So that's one of the first pieces of this is being able to kind of push that and sponsor that. The other piece I would say is that this is a big piece and component of the goal that we also have in partnership with the mayor's office, Director Moxton, myself, and others, in terms of also fundraising for additional funds for capacity building in whatever different area that we need it. So in kind of the stack of work that we're doing, we know that there's a need for additional funds. So we know and have estimated with partners in this work that to grow the homeownership even homeownership counseling, that we're looking at to grow it as large as we could see if every home ownership counseling agency wanted to move to home ownership coaching to kind of add that specialized, that we're probably looking at about $9 million a year for at least 5 years to help build capacity there. So we've been doing a lot of the work to also ensure that we know how much do we need, where do we need it, and how would we help deploy and also find support and funds for that as well, and leverage our philanthropy networks, not just local but national, and have that be part of the conversation. So we're starting with the CDC roundtable, having those discussions. We also regularly meet one-on-one with the different organizations, especially on the development side. We meet with the ones that are specific to the impact investment areas. We meet with the ones that are outside, and we're always available to provide even specialized technical assistance or try to help. We have an open door on that. If they have an issue, just come to us and let's figure out how we can help best, support them and shape them with the resources that we do have right now.
And so where does that fall in the new configuration of working with vacants? Is it going to be under your planning and strategy team? Is it going to be under, who's doing that work?
I think it actually, I think it is a number of different places, right? And it depends on what is needed in terms of capacity building. It actually will fall into many of the different divisions and across the divisions. If they're talking about needing assistance on home repair, then that's not going to be within the development division. It's going to be within.
Yeah, but I would think
homeownership.
that there would need to be a coordinating role, someone who, you know, would work with community development organizations and even small developers.
We don't have a dedicated coordinating role. We have a coordinating role that's associated with the CDC roundtable, and that's a planning department staff person that's acting as that coordinator for that. So that right now I'd say is an immediate space where we're getting that information to help then guide.
Sorry, very quickly, I just wanted to offer this. I think this is going to be a space where we will likely leverage a lot of support from philanthropy. So as you may recall, we got a $5 million grant from JPMorgan Chase, and we actually developed the developer cohort in the Power Initiative, which is focused on Black and Latina women developers. So philanthropy has already demonstrated that they're interested in helping us around capacity building, especially with small and minority and women developers, as we've seen through this investment through JP Morgan and Developer.
I think that a lot of these groups are already getting a lot of the grants from those folks, so it's got to be new funding. You know,
well, the developer. So there are a couple of components to that JP Morgan funding. So there were some more established developers like Parity Homes and Black Women Build. But what we developed was a capacity building program where your small, you know, upstarts are going through and getting the training and building their capacity so that they can do the work at the scale of a Black Women Build or Parity Homes, and that was all a part of that $5 million investment. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think the funding for Parity Homes was outside of that. They gave them $2 million over and above the $5 million for the other developers. But to your point, that is absolutely a part of the strategy, is that we have got to build capacity of our smaller developers to help us move some of these properties into productive use.
Yes, thank you. And then I was interested, getting away a little bit from the vacant property strategy. This is also on me, we haven't gotten an update recently on the implementation of inclusionary. I think we are waiting for the board. I don't know where that is. I think I know where that is. But what's the next step on that? You're just working on the regulations now?
So we are working on regulations. We have a meeting that has either been scheduled for June or will be with a number of members of the advocacy community around inclusionary. And then we will be making regulations available for public comment, for a robust public comment component to that as well.
Sometime in June after you meet with the advocates, and then you'll be, okay, that sounds good. And then the two kind of biggest parts of the biggest part of the strategy, of the vacant strategy, is the money. And we talked a little bit about core. Can you tell us a little bit more about when we're going to get the non-contiguous TIF and what that's going to look like? And just sort of an outline a little bit about how we're seeing the financing.
Yeah, so we have Project Core, which is committed $50 million a year to Baltimore City to tackle vacant properties. We have the Industrial Development Authority, which is on the city side, which we're working with Director Moxton on that. I think that's one that wouldn't hit in terms of debt service until fiscal year 26 for the IDA.
Right, I asked
in terms of the non-contiguous TIF, I believe we're working right now with MODR, and I think our goal is to be having briefings with the council members on the TIF starting, I think, the weekish of June 10th, actually. Very, very soon to start having those briefings and go into comprehensive overview.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was at a community meeting recently where the planner started talking about this with the community, which I think that's fine. But the information was different than how I had understood the non-contiguous TIF. The information that was given was, this is a TIF for infrastructure, which is not correct. This is a TIF for exactly for housing, and what does that look like? So I want to make sure that when we're socializing this, we're using the proper information about what's going on. But also just that, you know, because Director Moxton was clear that we don't have, and I saw in the budget book, we don't have any more debt service, you know, increased debt service in the budget book, so that our members understand how that financing works, and when it hits, you know, and is it that the developer has to eat that money first and then get reimbursed after the taxes come in? That's, you know, one way to think about it. The other is that the bond gets floated, they get the money, and then it's paid back.
So I want to,
the taxes come in.
I want to just, we just got to focus on questions. Go ahead. Just, it's 10:15, and we've had
Are you going to put a limit on some of my other colleagues if they keep going till midnight? I'm not going to go till midnight.
I may or may not. That's at the discretion of the chair, and the chair is telling you now, please focus on questions. So
Thank you.
Please focus on questions.
Right. Yeah. So I just, again, the information just has to be, you know.
So we have had an initial meeting with some of the planners. We actually, where's Tamara? It's coming up very soon. The 14th, we have a meeting with the planning department actually to confirm everything. We've met with some of the planners, but we have, you know, explanation, basically TIF 101 meeting with the planning department and the community planners so that they have the information and how it's, you know, being structured and so forth. And I think that a lot of the questions that you had and so forth would be covered in the briefing that we're working and we'll be working with MOGR. Like we said, we want to start working on getting those planned for the week of the 10th.
That would be great. And I have some specific questions about it, but since you're going to be briefing everybody, then I'll reserve that as well. And I will say this is my last question today. Going back to the ARPA real quick, there was a line item for technology for the permit office, and I also saw another line item in the budget book for the technology for the permit office. Can you explain those two items?
Yep, and I will say, if you do have, going back very quickly to the TIF question, if you could provide us any questions that you have ahead of time of the briefing so we can make sure that in that we're able to cover your exact questions on that. For so the ARPA funds we are under contract with Acelo for all of that, and that's not just the permit. So it's two systems that are included in that figure, which is both CHIP and on the code enforcement side and the permit software, et cetera, et cetera. And then that is, there are ongoing costs associated with that, and what you see in the budget book is the ongoing costs.
Got it. So the ARPA funding is that initial cost, and then the other piece is okay, that sounds good. And I just want to encourage you and your team to, you know, the vacancy crisis is a crisis. And I want you to ask for all the money you need to get this done. Asking for just 2 new positions, and I know we worked together on getting the ARPA, in rem positions. This is a big deal. So I just want to make sure that, you know, with my initial request, when we talk about what the capacity is for actually going to scale, tell us exactly what you need to do that, because we need to get this done. So. Thank you very much for taking the time to answer my questions and for everybody for staying. Thank you.
Councilman Torrance, you all right?
I just have one request, and I won't hold you. Meeting, because I think that you guys do a lot of great work, but I think coordination in terms of like technical assistance for people to access these things is something that is the next step for the work. Namely, I have an organization that is still waiting to figure out how to access the Catalyst grant funds that they were awarded. But that's not at fault of you guys. It's more so like, how do we help someone navigate the paperwork, right? And then in addition to that, there are other things that the agency has that my office has personally had to help people navigate, like taking a portable scanner to help with the light application. But I'm just thinking through like some things that we can help people navigate through. We'd like to have a meeting about how we can coordinate on a number of those things, but I won't keep you here this late.
I will say, we do have portable, well, I don't want to keep everybody
They use
here.
iPads and iPhones
Yeah.
to do scanning of documents and home visits.
So that's something we will continue to make sure that everybody has access, especially on that. That's a big piece of what the social service coordinators do around document collection, and one reason why sometimes that takes a significant amount of time, because they are going to people's homes, sometimes even looking in drawers and, you know, helping scan. And definitely as well in terms of other coordination for access. If you can shoot me a text or send me an email with the entity that is having a hard time accessing their Catalyst funds, we want to make sure that they can access them. So if you can send me that information, I will follow up tomorrow.
Any other questions? Jason, please extend my deep gratitude to Seth Greer, who I don't see here unless he's hiding somewhere. Outstanding public servant, and Hessler and Booker, I'm huge fans of your work. City's very lucky to have you guys in our service. We're now in recess till 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you.